What would you do if the love of your life vanished without a word, and 20 years later showed up at your door as one of the most powerful women in the country? Nathan Cole was a single father barely surviving a Chicago winter when a knock changed everything. The woman standing in his hallway was Isabella Vaughn, billionaire, CEO, and the girl who shattered his heart when they were just kids. But what she told him next was worse than any betrayal. Their entire heartbreak, every tear, every sleepless night, every year spent alone, had been built on a lie. If you want to find out how this story ends, stay with me until the very last word. Hit that like button right now and drop your city in the comments so I can see just how far this story travels. The radiator was making that sound again, not the gentle hissing Nathan had gotten used to over the years, the one that almost passed for white noise if he was tired enough. No, this was the clunking, deep, metallic, like someone trapped inside the pipes was trying to punch their way out. It had started around Thanksgiving and gotten worse every week since, and the super had promised 3 separate times to come look at it, and 3 separate times Nathan had come home to find a post-it note on his door that read something like, "Tomorrow for sure, Ray." Tomorrow never came. Ray was a liar. The radiator kept clunking. Nathan sat at the small kitchen table with his legs stretched under it, one sock foot pressed against the baseboard where the heat actually worked. Across from him, his 12-year-old daughter Lily had her math textbook open to a chapter on fractions, a subject she treated with the kind of personal hostility most people reserve for parking tickets and slow internet. "I don't understand why I need to know this," she said, for what Nathan estimated was the 4th time in 20 minutes. "Because your teacher says you do. My teacher also said that cursive would be important, and literally no one uses cursive." "That's different." "How is that different?" Nathan rubbed his eyes. It was almost 8:30 on a Wednesday night in the middle of January, and the apartment smelled like the chicken soup he had made from a rotisserie carcass, and whatever vegetables were starting to go soft in the fridge. The windows were frosted at the edges. Outside, Chicago was doing what Chicago did best in winter, punishing anyone foolish enough to live there. "Fractions are everywhere," he tried. "Cooking, construction. If you ever want to build a bookshelf." "Dad, when am I building a bookshelf?" "You don't know. Life is unpredictable." "My life is extremely predictable. School, homework, sleep, that's my whole life." He almost smiled. She had her mother's sharpness, that quick, dry way of cutting through whatever you were trying to sell her. Claire had been like that. She could look at you with those calm brown eyes and dismantle your argument before you even finished making it, and she did it so gently that you almost thanked her for it afterward. Lily had those same eyes, same brown, same steadiness. Some mornings Nathan looked at her across this exact table, and the resemblance hit him so hard he had to look away and busy himself with the coffee maker until the feeling passed. "Okay," he said, pulling her textbook closer. "Let's try this one. 3/8 plus 1/4. What's the first step?" "Finding a common denominator." "Right." "Which is 8. "Right. So what does 1/4 become?" 2/8. And 3/8 plus 2/8 is 5/8. I already knew that one. "Then do the next 5 and you're done." Lily groaned with the full dramatic weight of a 12-year-old who believed she was suffering more than any human in history. She pulled the textbook back, picked up her pencil, and started writing with exaggerated slowness, as if each number caused her physical pain. Nathan leaned back in his chair. The clunking continued. Wind pressed against the windows. Somewhere down the hall, a neighbor's television was playing loud enough that he could hear the muffled rhythm of a laugh track, and he found himself counting the beats between each burst of canned laughter, wondering what show it was, wondering if it was any good, wondering when he had become the kind of person whose evening entertainment consisted of listening to other people's televisions through drywall. He was 32. Sometimes that number felt right, and sometimes it felt like a clerical error, like someone in an office somewhere had added an extra decade to his file by accident. He did not feel 32. He felt older, not in the way that meant wise or distinguished. He wasn't the kind of man anyone described with words like distinguished, but in the way that meant tired, tired in the bones, tired in the specific way of a person who has been holding everything together for so long that he has forgotten what it feels like to let go. The knock came at exactly 8:47. Nathan noticed the time because he was looking at the microwave clock, thinking about whether it was too late to make a second pot of coffee or whether that would keep him up past midnight again. 8:47. 3 sharp knocks, not loud but deliberate, and with a strange precision that did not match the usual rhythm of someone asking to borrow sugar or complaining about the radiator. He looked at Lily. She looked at him. "You expecting somebody?" she asked. "No." "Maybe it's Ray." "Ray doesn't knock. Ray slides notes under the door like a coward." Lily snorted. Nathan stood up and walked to the door. The apartment was small enough that this required exactly 7 steps. He had counted once during a particularly boring Sunday. 7 steps from the kitchen table to the front door, 9 from the bathroom to the couch, 14 from Lily's bedroom to the refrigerator, which was a trip she made roughly 40 times a day. He unlocked the deadbolt, turned the knob, and opened the door. And then everything he knew about his own life stopped making sense. She was standing in the hallway under the flickering fluorescent light that the building manager had been meaning to fix since September. She wore a dark coat, long, tailored, clearly expensive in a way that looked wrong against the scuffed linoleum and the water stain on the ceiling above her. Her dark hair was pulled back and her face was the same. Not the same. Not exactly. 20 years had passed, and faces change. And he knew that. He understood the basic biology of aging and time and all of that. But the bones were the same. The jaw, the dark eyes, the way she held her chin slightly raised, like she was bracing for something, like she was ready for whatever came next, even when she wasn't. Nathan's hand tightened on the doorknob. "No," he said. Not a response to anything she had said. She hadn't said anything. It was just the only word his brain could produce. A refusal. A denial. Because the woman standing in his hallway could not be who she looked like, because that person was gone. Had been gone since he was 12 years old. Had disappeared so completely from his life that he had eventually forced himself to stop thinking about her entirely, to file her away in the part of his memory where he kept things too painful to examine. "Hello, Nathan," she said. Her voice was lower than he remembered, steadier, but the cadence was the same. The way she hit the second syllable of his name just slightly harder than the first. "No," he said again. "I know this is Isabella?" She nodded. Once, like she had practiced this moment, like she had stood in front of a mirror somewhere and rehearsed the nod, the expression, the exact amount of composure she would need to maintain. Behind him, Lily's voice. "Dad? Who is it?" Nathan could not answer. He was staring at Isabella Vaughn the way you stare at a car wreck or a magic trick, with a kind of frozen incomprehension, a total failure of the brain to process what the eyes were reporting. Isabella Vaughn, standing in his hallway, in a coat that probably cost more than his rent. "Can I come in?" she asked. What are you, how did you?" He stopped, started again. "It's been 20 years. I know. You can't just..." He lowered his voice, conscious of Lily behind him. "You can't just show up." "I know that too." "Then why are you here?" She looked at him, and for just a moment the composure cracked. Not much. A flicker. The way her eyes shifted down and then back up. The way her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. If he hadn't known her face so intimately, if he hadn't spent his entire adolescence memorizing every micro-expression she made, he would have missed it entirely. "Because my father is dying," she said, "and he's asking to see you." The words landed like a physical thing. Nathan felt them in his chest, a strange compression, like someone had pressed a hand flat against his sternum. "Your father," he repeated. "Yes." "Richard Vaughn." "Yes." "The man who, He stopped himself, took a breath. "Your father wants to see me. Before it's too late. He doesn't have much time." Nathan looked at her. 20 years. 20 years of silence, of nothing, of a door that had closed so hard and so completely that he had spent his entire adult life trying to convince himself it had never been open in the first place. And now she was standing in his hallway, in January, in the middle of a Chicago winter, telling him her father wanted to see him. "Dad?" Lily was standing now, visible behind him in the narrow entryway. "Everything okay?" Nathan turned halfway. "Yeah, sweetheart, just give me a minute." He stepped into the hallway and pulled the door mostly closed behind him, leaving it open just a crack. The fluorescent light buzzed and flickered. He could smell Isabella's perfume, something subtle and expensive. Nothing like the cheap vanilla body spray she used to wear when they were kids. Everything about her was different, and everything about her was exactly the same, and that contradiction was making it very hard to think. "You need to explain," he said. "Right now, from the beginning." "I will. But not here, not like this. I need you to come with me." "Come with you?" "Isabella, I have a 12-year-old doing math homework in there. I can't just leave." "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Everything was always important with your family. That was the problem." She took it, absorbed it, didn't flinch. Nathan remembered a girl who flinched at everything, who cried when birds hit windows, who once refused to eat dinner for 2 days because her father yelled at a gardener. This woman did not flinch. "Nathan," she said, and her voice was quiet now, stripped of whatever professional polish she had arrived with. "I know I have no right to ask you anything. I know that. I walked away from you, and I never explained why, and you have every reason to close that door and forget I was ever here. But I am asking you, please." He looked at her for a long time. The hallway was cold. He was standing in one sock foot and a pair of old jeans and a t-shirt from a 5K fun run he had done 3 years ago. She was wearing a coat that could probably pay for his daughter's first year of college. "How did you find me?" he asked. "That wasn't hard." "Right, billionaire." The word came out sharper than he intended. Or maybe not. Maybe he intended it exactly that sharp. "Nathan, how long has he been sick?" "Months. It's pancreatic, stage 4. And he waited until now to ask for me. He waited until I found out the truth." Something about the way she said it, the truth, made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. It was the weight of it, the way the words sounded heavy in her mouth, like she had been carrying them for a while and they had worn grooves into her. "What truth?" he said. Isabella looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time since she had appeared in his hallway, she looked like the girl he remembered, scared, uncertain, open in a way that seemed almost dangerous. "Can we sit down somewhere?" she asked. "Tell me." "Nathan, tell me right now, Isabella, what truth?" She was quiet for 3 seconds. He counted. 3 seconds of silence in a hallway that smelled like old carpet and someone's leftover Chinese food, with the fluorescent light buzzing above them like a dying insect. "Our breakup," she said. "Everything that happened between us, the letters, the silence, all of it." She paused. "My father did it. All of it. He destroyed us on purpose." Nathan didn't move. "He intercepted your letters," she continued. "Every single one. He wrote responses pretending to be me, telling you I had moved on, that I didn't want to hear from you anymore. And he told me you had done the same thing, that you had found someone else, that you had said terrible things about me and my family. He showed me fabricated messages. He hired someone to feed me lies about where you were and what you were doing." Her voice was shaking now, fine tremors running through it like cracks spreading through ice. "For 20 years, Nathan. 20 years I believed you threw me away, and you believed the same thing about me. And none of it, not one single word of it, was real." The hallway tilted, or it felt like it tilted. Nathan put a hand on the wall to steady himself and realized his fingers were trembling. "That's not possible," he said. "It is. Your father, he couldn't have. The things I got, the letter that said, he wrote it, or had someone write it, all of it. The one that said you never loved me." Isabella closed her eyes, just for a moment. When she opened them, they were wet. "I never wrote that. I never thought it. Not for one single second of my life." Nathan leaned against the wall. The plaster was cold through his t-shirt. He could feel his heart doing something strange. Not racing, exactly, but beating with a heaviness, each thud deliberate and slow, as if his body was trying to process what his mind could not. 20 years. 20 years of building a life around a wound that had never existed. 20 years of convincing himself that his first love, the only person who had ever made him feel like he was enough exactly as he was, had looked at him and decided he wasn't worth keeping. And it was all fake. Every bit of it. Manufactured by a man with enough money and enough cruelty to reach into two children's lives and tear them apart like paper. Why, he managed. Why would he do that? Because you were poor, Isabella said flatly. Because you were ordinary. Because your father worked in a factory and your mother cleaned houses and he decided that was disqualifying. He told me once, years later before I knew any of this, that the most important thing a parent can do is protect their child from wasting their potential. I didn't understand what he meant then. She laughed, and it was the saddest sound Nathan had ever heard. I understand now. When did you find out? 3 weeks ago. He started talking when the doctors told him it was terminal. I think he wanted to clear his conscience before... She stopped, swallowed. He told me everything. Sat me down in his study, the one with the fireplace, and the first edition books he never lets anyone touch, and he told me every single thing he had done, as if he was reading off a quarterly earnings report, calm, detailed, like he was explaining a business strategy that had performed well. And you want me to go see him. He wants to tell you himself. I don't care what he wants. I know. Then why should I go? She didn't answer immediately. She looked at the crack in his door, where a sliver of warm light spilled into the hallway. He knew she could see the edge of his kitchen, the table, Lily's math textbook. Because I think you need to hear it, she said quietly, not for him, for you. Nathan stood in the cold hallway for what felt like a very long time. Inside his apartment, he could hear Lily's pencil moving across paper. The radiator clunked. A door opened and closed somewhere on another floor. Give me your number, he said finally. Nathan, your number. I'll call you tomorrow. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a card. Cream-colored, heavy stock, embossed lettering. Isabella Vaughn, CEO, Vaughn Industries. There were 2 phone numbers and an email address. The card felt like it weighed more than it should. The second number is my personal line, she said. Use that one. He took the card. Their fingers didn't touch. Tomorrow, he said. She nodded, took a step back. He watched her walk down the hallway toward the elevator, her heels clicking on the linoleum with a sound that was precise and even, and somehow lonely. He stood there until the elevator doors closed. Then he went back inside, locked the deadbolt, and sat down at the kitchen table across from his daughter. His hands were steady. He was very good at keeping his hands steady. Who was that? Lily asked without looking up from her homework. Nobody. Old friend. That wasn't a nobody face. That was a weird face. I don't have a weird face. Dad, you're literally making the weirdest face I've ever seen right now. He forced a smile. Finish your fractions. I already finished them. Then check your work. I already checked. They're right. He looked at her paper. They were right. Every single one. Go brush your teeth, he said. I'll be in to say goodnight in a few minutes. Lily gathered her things with the disorganized efficiency of a 12-year-old. Textbook closed but not put away. Pencil dropped on the table instead of in the cup. Paper folded once and shoved into a folder that was already overflowing with other folded papers. She walked toward the bathroom, then stopped and turned around. Dad? Yeah? You look sad. I'm not sad. I'm just tired. She looked at him the way Claire used to look at him, with that quiet, knowing expression that said she wasn't buying it but wasn't going to push. Then she went to brush her teeth. Nathan sat alone at the kitchen table. He turned Isabella's business card over in his fingers. The paper was so smooth it was almost slippery. Vaughn Industries. He knew the name. Everyone knew the name. You couldn't live in this country and not know Vaughn Industries, the real estate empire, the tech investments, the pharmaceutical arm that had been in the news last year for some kind of breakthrough drug. And at the top of all of it, the youngest female CEO to hit the Forbes Billionaire list before 30. Isabella Vaughn, the girl from the magazines and the business channels and the conference stages, the girl who used to sit next to him on the bleachers behind his middle school and share a bag of sour gummy worms while they talked about nothing. He put the card down on the table and pressed his palm flat against it, as if he could hold it in place, keep it from meaning what it meant. The radiator clunked. He did not sleep that night. Instead, he lay on his back in the dark and stared at the ceiling and let the memories come. He had spent years building walls against them, careful, deliberate walls, constructed brick by brick out of routine and exhaustion and the relentless forward motion of raising a child alone. But now the walls were useless. Isabella had knocked on his door and the whole architecture had collapsed, and the memories flooded in like water through a broken dam. He was 12. He was 12 years old and standing in the parking lot of a grocery store with his mother, helping her load bags into the trunk of their old Honda, and a black car pulled into the next space over and a girl got out of the back seat and looked at him. That was it. That was the whole beginning. A girl getting out of a car. Dark hair, dark eyes, wearing a private school uniform that made her look stiff and uncomfortable. She glanced at him, and he glanced at her, and something happened. Not fireworks, not music, not any of the stupid cliches that movies used to describe the moment. Something quieter. A click, like a key turning in a lock he didn't know he had. They started talking. He couldn't remember who spoke first. He thought it was her, but that might have been a reconstruction, a narrative he built later to make the story sound better. What he remembered was that she was funny. Not in a way that was trying hard, but in a way that was almost accidental, like she kept accidentally saying things that were hilarious, and then being surprised when he laughed. Her name was Isabella Vaughn, and her father owned half the city, and she was the loneliest person Nathan had ever met. They became friends. Then they became best friends. Then they became something else. Something that didn't have a name. Something that existed in the spaces between phone calls that lasted until 2 a.m, and afternoons spent lying on the grass in the park near his house, and the way she once took his hand during a movie and held it for the entire second half without either of them saying a word about it. He loved her. He loved her the way you can only love someone when you're 12, 13, 14, with a totality that left no room for doubt or qualification. He loved her completely, stupidly, with his whole unfinished self. And then she disappeared. Not all at once. It was gradual at first. Missed calls, shorter texts. A weekend where she said she was busy, and then another weekend where she didn't respond at all. He wrote her letters, actual letters, on paper, because she had once told him that physical mail made her feel like someone cared enough to use their hands, and she didn't write back. Then the letter came. He still remembered every word. He had read it so many times that the creases in the paper had gone soft, the ink slightly smeared from being folded and unfolded by shaking hands. The letter told him she had moved on, that what they had was a childhood thing and she had outgrown it, that he should do the same, that she didn't want to hear from him again. The handwriting had looked like hers. He had believed it. He had believed it because what else was he supposed to believe? He was 14 years old, and the girl he loved had told him she didn't love him back, and he didn't have the emotional vocabulary to question it. He just absorbed it, took the blow, packed the hurt away somewhere deep, and built his life around the hole it left. And now, lying in his bed at 32, listening to the wind rattle the windows and the radiator clunk its broken rhythm, he was being told that the letter was fake. The silence was fake. The abandonment was fake. All of it, every miserable piece of it, had been engineered by a man who looked at a factory worker's son and saw something beneath his daughter. Nathan pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. He could feel something building in his chest. Not anger, not sadness, but something bigger than both. A feeling that didn't have a name. The feeling of discovering that the foundation of your pain was made of smoke. He got up at 5:30 and made coffee. The apartment was dark. Lily wouldn't be up for another hour. He sat at the kitchen table with his hands wrapped around the mug and watched the first gray light of January creep across the floor. At 6:15, he picked up his phone and dialed the second number on the card. She answered on the second ring. "Nathan? I'll come," he said, "but I'm not doing it for him. I wouldn't expect you to. And I'm not staying long. However long you need." "When?" "Today, if you can. His doctors say." She paused. "Soon. I have work until 3. I can come after. I'll send a car. I'll drive myself." A brief silence. "Okay, I'll text you the address." "I know the address," he said, and the words surprised him because it was true. After all these years, he still knew the address of the Vaughn estate. It was filed away in the same part of his brain that held song lyrics from middle school and the smell of his grandmother's kitchen. Permanent, involuntary, resistant to all attempts at deletion. "Nathan," she said. "Yeah. Thank you." He hung up, drank his coffee, took a shower, made Lily's lunch, turkey sandwich, apple slices, 2 cookies he pretended were one because she always found the second one and it made her day. He drove her to school and watched her walk through the front doors with her backpack slung over one shoulder, not looking back, already absorbed in the world of 7th grade and whatever social architecture existed there that he would never fully understand. Then he drove to work. Nathan worked as a maintenance supervisor for a mid-sized property management company on the northwest side. It was not glamorous. The job involved fixing things that were broken, maintaining things that were about to break, and sometimes sitting in a truck in a parking lot eating a sandwich while waiting for a parts delivery. He was good at it. He had a mechanical intuition that his boss called spooky, a way of listening to a furnace or looking at a pipe joint and knowing almost instinctively where the problem lived. He had gotten the job 6 months after Claire died, when Lily was 7, and the savings were running out, and the world had narrowed to a series of urgent practicalities: rent, food, school pickup, bedtime. He had no college degree, no special training, but he could fix things, and it turned out there was an entire economy built around things being broken. Today he replaced a garbage disposal in a unit on Kedzie, rewired a bathroom exhaust fan in a building on Pulaski, and spent 2 hours tracking down a leak in a basement that turned out to be coming from a crack in the foundation that had been there since the building was built in 1947. He did all of this with his usual competence. If anyone noticed he was distracted, they didn't say anything. Nathan was not the kind of man people asked personal questions. He was polite, reliable, quiet in a way that discouraged curiosity. At 3 o'clock, he clocked out and sat in his truck for 5 minutes. The address was on the North Shore. Of course it was. The Vaughn estate had always been on the North Shore, nestled among the other estates belonging to the kind of people who use summer as a verb. He remembered driving past it once, years ago, back when he was still young enough to torture himself with proximity to what he had lost. The gates, the trees, the long gravel drive that curved out of sight. He started the truck and drove north. The traffic was bad. It was always bad. Chicago traffic existed in a permanent state of dysfunction, as if the entire road system had been designed by someone who hated drivers on a personal level. He sat on the expressway and watched the brake lights of the car ahead of him, and tried not to think about what he was driving toward. He failed. He thought about Isabella's face in the hallway, the controlled composure, the expensive coat, the way she had said, "My father did it," with a flatness that spoke of someone who had already processed the information through every stage of grief and come out the other side into something beyond anger. A cold, clarified understanding that was worse than rage because it would never burn itself out. He thought about his wife, Claire, 3 years dead now. She had known about Isabella, not everything, but enough. He had told her once, early in their relationship, that he had been in love before and that it had ended badly. Claire, being Claire, hadn't pressed. She had simply said, "Everyone carries something," and moved on, and he had loved her for that more than he could ever articulate. Claire had been the good thing that happened after the bad thing, the proof that life could still work. She was warm where Isabella had been intense, steady where Isabella had been volatile. She laughed easily. She sang in the shower. She ate cereal for dinner at least twice a week and felt zero guilt about it. She was the most fundamentally decent person Nathan had ever met. And when the cancer took her, quickly, brutally, in a span of 9 months that felt like both an instant and an eternity, he had genuinely wondered whether he would survive it. He survived it because of Lily. Because Lily needed breakfast and clean clothes and help with homework and someone to say goodnight to, and those small requirements, repeated daily, formed a structure that held him together when nothing else could. The exit appeared. He took it. The roads got wider and quieter. The houses got bigger. The lawns got greener, even in January, because people with enough money could apparently override winter itself. The gates were the same, black iron, tall, flanked by stone pillars. There was an intercom. He rolled down his window and the cold hit him like a wall. Nathan Cole, he said. Isabella Vaughn is expecting me. A pause. Then the gates opened. The driveway was long, ridiculously long, lined with bare trees whose branches made skeletal patterns against the gray sky. The house appeared gradually, growing larger as he approached, and it was even bigger than he remembered. A massive stone structure that seemed to have been designed by someone who couldn't decide between a mansion and a small castle and had simply built both. He parked his truck next to a row of vehicles that made his 10-year-old Ford look like it had wandered in from a different economic reality. A Mercedes. A Range Rover. Something black and low that he didn't recognize but that probably cost more than his apartment building. He sat in his truck for another minute. 2. 3. Then he got out and walked to the front door. It opened before he could knock. A woman in a dark uniform, some kind of household staff, nodded and led him through a foyer that was larger than his entire apartment. Marble floors. A chandelier. A staircase that swept upward in a curve that made no structural sense but looked expensive. Isabella was waiting for him in a hallway off the main entrance. She had changed clothes since last night. She wore dark slacks and a simple white blouse, and her hair was down, and without the armor of the expensive coat, she looked more like the person he remembered and less like the one on magazine covers. "Thank you for coming," she said. "You said that already." "I know." She hesitated. "He's upstairs, in his room. There's a nurse with him. He has good days and bad days. Today is a good day, which means he's lucid and talking." "Lucky me." She looked at him. "You don't have to do this." "I know." "Then why are you?" He didn't answer. He didn't have an answer, or he had too many answers and couldn't pick one. Because she asked. Because the letter that broke him wasn't real. Because he needed to look the man who ruined his life in the face and understand why. "Lead the way," he said. She led him up the staircase, down a wide corridor lined with paintings that looked original and probably were. The house was warm, actually warm, not the struggling, uneven warmth of his apartment, but a deep, enveloping warmth that felt almost aggressive in its comfort. He could hear a clock ticking somewhere. The carpet was so thick his work boots barely made a sound. She stopped at a door near the end of the hall and turned to face him. "Nathan, whatever he says in there, whatever you feel, I need you to know something first." Her eyes were locked on his. "I didn't know about any of it. I believed the lies just like you did. I spent 20 years thinking you had abandoned me, and I built my entire life around that belief. And I need you to know that I am not my father." "I know," he said, and he meant it. She opened the door. The room was large and smelled like medicine and old wood. Heavy curtains were half drawn across tall windows. A hospital bed had been set up near the fireplace, one of those adjustable ones with rails and controls, incongruous against the antique furniture and Persian rugs. And in the bed, propped up on pillows, was Richard Vaughn. Nathan had not seen him in 20 years either, and the change was brutal. The man he remembered had been large, not fat, but big, solid, the kind of man who filled a doorway and commanded a room simply by existing in it. This Richard Vaughn was smaller, diminished. The skin hung loose on his frame. His hands, resting on the blanket, looked like the hands of a much older man. An IV line ran from one arm to a stand beside the bed. A nurse sat in a chair in the corner, reading something on a tablet. Richard's eyes were open. They found Nathan as soon as the door opened, and despite everything, the illness, the shrinkage, the evident decay, those eyes were still sharp. Still the same pale blue that Nathan remembered from the few times he had been allowed in this house as a child, when Richard Vaughn had looked at him with an expression that was polite on the surface and utterly dismissive underneath. "Nathan Cole," Richard said. His voice was thin but clear. "You actually came." "Your daughter asked me to." "Sit down." There was a chair near the bed. Nathan did not sit in it. "I'll stand," he said. Richard looked at him for a long moment. Then something moved across his face. Not remorse exactly, not yet, but something adjacent to it. An acknowledgement. A man at the end of his life looking at the wreckage he had created and finally being unable to look away. "I suppose she told you," Richard said. "She told me enough." "Then you know what I did." "I want to hear you say it." The old man's eyes shifted to Isabella, who was standing near the door with her arms crossed. Something passed between them, a look Nathan could not fully read. Then Richard turned back to him. "I separated you," he said, "deliberately, systematically. I intercepted every piece of communication between you. I fabricated responses. I hired people to feed both of you false information about the other. I used every resource at my disposal to make two teenagers believe they had been abandoned by the person they loved." The words hung in the air. The clock ticked somewhere in the house. The nurse in the corner was very still, eyes fixed on her tablet, pretending not to exist. "Why?" Nathan said. His voice was steady. He was proud of that. "Because I believed I was protecting my daughter." "From what?" "From a life that was beneath her." Nathan felt it then. The anger. Not the explosive kind. The other kind. The slow kind. The kind that starts in the pit of your stomach and spreads outward like cold water, filling every space, pressing against the inside of your ribs. "I was 12 years old," Nathan said. "I know." She was 12 years old. "I know." "We were children. You were children who were going to grow up. And when you grew up, you would have held her back. Your world was too small for her, Nathan. I could see that. I could see where she was headed, and I could see where you were headed, and I made a decision." "You made a decision for us." "Yes." "Without asking, without telling, without giving either of us a choice." "That is what parents do. They make decisions their children cannot." Nathan stared at him, at this shrunken, dying man in his enormous bed in his enormous house, still defending the logic of what he had done with the calm certainty of someone explaining a sound investment. "You destroyed us," Nathan said quietly. "I know." "Do you? Do you actually know? Because from where I'm standing, you look like a man who did the math and decided it was worth it." Something flickered in Richard's eyes. The first crack. "It wasn't worth it," he said, and his voice was different now, quieter, rougher. "I watched my daughter build an empire, and I watched her do it alone. No partner, no family, no one she would let close enough to touch her. She became exactly what I wanted her to become. Powerful, successful, untouchable. And she is miserable. She has been miserable for 20 years. And I did that." Nathan said nothing. "I am not asking for your forgiveness," Richard continued. "I am not stupid enough to believe I deserve it. I am asking you to know what happened, to hear it from my mouth. Because my daughter will have to live with this after I'm gone, and she deserves to have someone else who knows the full truth." Nathan looked at Isabella. She was still standing by the door, arms crossed, face utterly still, but her eyes were bright. Not with tears, not yet. With something harder than tears. With the effort of holding herself together in this room with these two men, one who had destroyed her life and one whose life had been destroyed alongside hers. He turned back to Richard. "I'm not going to forgive you," he said. "I didn't ask you to." "I know. I'm saying it anyway. I want it to be clear." "It's clear." Nathan nodded. He looked around the room. The heavy curtains, the fireplace, the paintings, the medical equipment that seemed to be the only honest thing in the space. Then he looked back at the man in the bed. "Is there anything else?" he asked. Richard Vaughn studied him with those pale blue eyes, and Nathan could see it now. The exhaustion that went deeper than illness. The weariness of a man who had spent his whole life controlling everything and was finally confronting the one thing he could not control. "Take care of her," Richard said. Nathan turned and walked out of the room. He made it to the end of the hallway before Isabella caught up with him. He heard her footsteps behind him, quick, nearly running, and then her voice. "Nathan, wait!" He stopped, but didn't turn around. "Are you okay?" she asked. He laughed. It came out strange. Short, ragged, not really a laugh at all. "Am I okay? Your dying father just told me he spent 20 years playing puppet master with our lives, and you're asking if I'm okay." "I don't know what else to ask." He turned then. She was standing a few feet away, and in the dim light of the hallway, she looked young. Younger than 30. Like the years had peeled back in this house, in these corridors she had grown up in, and left her standing there as the girl she used to be. "I need to pick up my daughter," he said. "I know. I'm going to go pick up my daughter and make her dinner and help her with her homework and go to bed. That's what I'm going to do right now. Okay? And then tomorrow, he stopped, rubbed his face with both hands. I don't know about tomorrow. You don't have to know. He looked at her. Standing in the hallway of the house that had been built on money and control and the systematic destruction of everything soft and honest and real, standing there in her white blouse with her arms at her sides and her chin raised, the same way she had raised it in his hallway the night before, bracing for whatever came next. Good night, Isabella, he said. Good night, Nathan. He walked down the staircase, through the foyer, past the chandelier and the marble and the paintings, out the front door, into the cold, into the January dark where his truck sat waiting like the only thing in the world that made sense. He drove home. He picked up Lily from her after-school program 7 minutes late and apologized. He made spaghetti because it was easy, and she liked it. They ate together at the kitchen table while the radiator clunked and the wind pushed against the windows, and Lily told him about a girl in her class who had brought a lizard to school in her backpack. Like a real lizard? Nathan asked. A bearded dragon. His name is Kevin. The girl or the lizard? The lizard, Dad. Obviously. He almost smiled. Almost. Later, after Lily was in bed, after the dishes were washed and the leftovers were put away and the apartment was quiet, Nathan sat on the couch in the dark and held Isabella's business card in his hands and stared at nothing. 20 years. 20 years built on a lie. He had spent his entire adult life believing that the first person he ever loved had looked at him and found him wanting. And that belief, that foundational, load-bearing belief, had shaped everything. His marriage to Claire, as good as it was, had always carried the faint undertone of a man who believed he had been someone's second choice, even though Claire had never once made him feel that way. His work ethic, his self-sufficiency, his fierce determination to need nothing from anyone, all of it was built on the bedrock certainty that Nathan Cole was the kind of person who got left behind. And now, the bedrock was gone, dissolved, revealed as a fabrication. And he was standing over the empty space where it used to be, trying to figure out what to do next. The radiator clunked. The wind blew. Chicago was cold and dark, and exactly the same as it had been yesterday, before a woman in an expensive coat had knocked on his door and rearranged the entire architecture of his past. Nathan sat on the couch and held the card and did not sleep. He called her 3 days later. Not because he was ready. He wasn't ready. He wasn't sure what ready would even feel like at this point, whether it was a threshold he would cross or just a lie he would eventually tell himself until he believed it. But 3 days had passed, and in those 3 days he had replayed every word from that hallway, that bedroom, the dying man's confession, and the replaying had not made anything clearer. If anything, it had made everything worse because each time he went through it, he noticed something new, a detail he had missed, an inflection he had glossed over, a silence that meant more than he had initially understood. So he called, not because he was ready, but because the not calling was eating him alive. Isabella picked up on the first ring this time, like she had been holding the phone. How is he? Nathan asked, skipping the greeting entirely. A pause. Worse. He had a bad night. The nurses adjusted his medication, but he's sleeping more now, hours at a time. Is he in pain? They're managing it. That's the word they keep using. Managing. Nathan leaned against the kitchen counter. Lily was at school. The apartment was quiet except for the radiator, which had graduated from clunking to a low, persistent whine, as if it too was deteriorating in sympathy with the season. I want to ask you something, he said, and I need you to answer honestly. Okay. When you came to my door, was that your idea or his? She didn't answer immediately. He could hear her breathing, soft and measured, the sound of someone choosing their words with surgical care. Both, she said finally. He asked me to find you, but I had already been thinking about it. Since the night he told me everything, I looked you up, Nathan, before he even asked. I found your address. I drove past your building twice before I actually knocked. Twice. The first time I sat in my car for 40 minutes and then drove away. The second time I made it to the lobby and turned around. The third time I made it to your door. What changed the third time? I ran out of excuses not to. He closed his eyes. The counter was cold under his forearm. Outside, a garbage truck was making its slow, grinding way down the alley, and the sound of it, mechanical, mundane, relentlessly ordinary, felt like an anchor. Something real in a conversation that kept threatening to drift into territory he didn't know how to navigate. "I need to see him again," Nathan said. "When?" "Today. Can I come today?" "Of course. Nathan, are you sure?" "No, but I'm coming anyway." He drove to the North Shore that afternoon. The sky was the same flat gray it had been all week, the kind of winter sky that looked less like weather and more like an absence, as if someone had simply forgotten to put anything above the city. The roads were salted and wet. His truck made a sound on the highway that he didn't love but had learned to ignore, a faint rattle from somewhere near the passenger side that he kept meaning to investigate and never did. "The cobbler's shoes," Claire used to say. "The mechanic who can't fix his own truck." The gates opened without him having to announce himself this time. Someone had been told to expect him. Isabella met him at the front door. She looked different from the last visit, not worse exactly, but thinner somehow. Like the stress was pulling her taut from the inside. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, and without the professional armor, he could see the tiredness around her eyes, the slight hollowness in her cheeks that came from too many skipped meals and too little sleep. "He's awake," she said. "He's been asking for you." "Asking how?" "By name, repeatedly. The nurse said he's been saying your name since this morning." Nathan followed her up the staircase. The house felt different in daylight, bigger if that was possible, and emptier. The kind of empty that had nothing to do with furniture and everything to do with the way sound moved through the rooms, echoing slightly, bouncing off surfaces that had never absorbed the noise of a real family living a real life. Richard Vaughn was propped up in bed, same as before, but the decline since Nathan's last visit 3 days ago was visible and startling. His face had thinned. The skin around his eyes had darkened. His breathing had a new quality to it, a faint rasp at the edges, like paper being crumpled very slowly, but his eyes were open, and when Nathan walked in, those pale blue eyes fixed on him with an intensity that seemed to belong to a healthier man. "Sit down this time," Richard said. "Please." Nathan looked at the chair, then he sat. "I want to tell you something I didn't say last time," Richard said. His voice was weaker than before, but the words were clear, deliberate. A man who had spent his life commanding rooms still commanding this one, even from a hospital bed. "When I made the decision to separate you and Isabella, I told myself it was about her future, her potential, the life she deserved. But that wasn't the whole truth." He paused, swallowed with effort. "The truth is I was afraid," he continued. "I was afraid of you. Not of who you were, but of what you represented. You were proof that my daughter's happiness didn't depend on me, on my money, on the world I had built for her. She was happier sitting on a park bench with you eating cheap candy than she had ever been in this house, and that terrified me. Because if she didn't need any of this, then what was any of it for?" Nathan said nothing. "I destroyed your relationship because I couldn't stand the idea that I was irrelevant to my own daughter's joy. That's the real reason. Everything else? The money, the class, the future I imagined for her. That was the story I told myself so I wouldn't have to face what I actually was, which was jealous of a 12-year-old boy." The room was very quiet. The nurse had left at some point. Nathan hadn't noticed when. It was just the three of them now, Nathan in the chair, Richard in the bed, and Isabella standing near the window with her back half turned, looking out at the gray sky. "I don't know what you want me to say to that," Nathan said. "I don't want you to say anything. I want you to know it. There's a difference." "Okay, I know it. And I want—" Richard's voice caught, the first time Nathan had heard it falter. "I want you to know that I looked at my daughter last week. Really looked at her. The way you look at someone when you know you won't see them much longer. And what I saw was a woman who has achieved everything I ever wanted for her and has nothing I ever wanted for her. She has power and wealth and influence, and she is profoundly, structurally alone. And that is my doing, not the market, not bad luck, mine." Isabella's shoulders moved, a small motion. She didn't turn around. "Your daughter," Richard said, and his eyes drifted to something beyond Nathan, something only the dying could see. "What's her name?" Lily. Lily. He repeated it like he was tasting the word. How old? 12. Same age they were, Isabella said from the window, still not turning. Her voice was flat, controlled. Richard closed his eyes. Would you do it? He asked. If you believed it was the only way to protect her, if you truly believed the person she loved would limit her, hold her back, keep her from becoming everything she could be, would you do what I did? Nathan looked at this man, this ruined, dying man who had once been powerful enough to reach into two children's lives and rearrange them like furniture, and he felt something he had not expected to feel. Not forgiveness, not even close, but a terrible, unwanted understanding, because the honest answer was, he didn't know. He didn't know what he would do to protect Lily. The thought of someone hurting her, limiting her, trapping her in a life smaller than the one she deserved, it made something primal and ugly rise in his chest. He would never do what Richard had done. He was certain of that. But the impulse to protect, the raw, desperate need to shield your child from anything that might diminish them, that he understood. And understanding was worse than anger. Anger was clean. Understanding was messy. It got into everything. No, Nathan said. I wouldn't. Richard opened his eyes and looked at him, and Nathan could see that the old man knew he was telling the truth, and also knew the truth was more complicated than a single word. Good, Richard said. Then you're a better man than I was. Nathan stood up. The chair scraped softly against the thick carpet. I need air, he said, and walked out. He found a door at the end of the first-floor hallway that led to a stone patio overlooking the back of the property. The yard, if you could call something that size a yard, stretched out toward a tree line in the distance, all of it brown and dormant, waiting for a spring that felt impossibly far away. His breath made clouds in the cold. He stood with his hands in his jacket pockets and tried to arrange what he was feeling into something manageable, and failed. The door opened behind him. You okay? Isabella asked. People keep asking me that. Because you keep looking like you're not. He almost smiled. Your father just asked me if I would have done what he did, to protect Lily. I heard. I said no. I heard that too. I meant it. I know you did. They stood side by side on the cold patio, not touching, looking out at the dead winter landscape. Isabella. Yeah. What are we doing here? She was quiet for a long time. A bird, something small and brown, too stubborn or too stupid to have migrated, landed on a bare branch near the patio and sat there looking at them with the blank, evaluative stare that birds always had, like they were judging humanity and finding it wanting. I don't know, she said. I've run a company with 4,000 employees. I've negotiated deals worth more than some countries' GDP. I've stood in front of Senate committees and answered questions without flinching. And right now, standing on this patio with you, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. That's weirdly comforting. Why? Because I thought it was just me. She looked at him, and for a moment, just a moment, the 20 years collapsed and they were kids again, standing somewhere together, uncertain about everything, sure only of each other. Then the moment passed. Because they weren't kids, they were adults with scars and histories and a dead wife and a dying father and 20 years of damage that couldn't be undone by a look on a patio. Come inside, she said. It's freezing. I'll make coffee. You make coffee? I learned. I'm actually terrible at it, but I learned. A billionaire who makes bad coffee. Everyone has a flaw. He followed her back inside. The kitchen, one of the kitchens, because of course this house had more than one, was enormous and spotless, and clearly designed for a professional staff rather than a single woman making coffee at 4 p.m. Isabella moved through it with the slightly uncertain efficiency of someone who knew where everything was but still felt like a guest in her own home. She made coffee. It was, as promised, terrible. Too strong, slightly burned, with a bitterness that suggested the beans had been expensive and the execution had not lived up to their potential. This is awful, Nathan said. I told you. No, I mean, this is genuinely one of the worst cups of coffee I've ever had, and I drink gas station coffee. Are you going to keep drinking it? Obviously. They sat at a kitchen island that could have seated 12 people comfortably. Nathan wrapped his hands around the mug. It was warm, at least, and looked at the woman sitting across from him. "Tell me about the last 20 years, he said. "The real version." Isabella stared into her own mug. "The real version isn't the one you read about in Forbes." "I figured. I graduated top of my class, MBA from Wharton. Took over the company at 26 when my father stepped down. Youngest female CEO on the Fortune 500 list. Built the pharmaceutical division from scratch. Tripled the company's valuation in 4 years. She recited it like a resume. Flat, practiced. That's the public version. And the private version?" She took a sip of her terrible coffee. "The private version is that I haven't had a relationship that lasted longer than 3 months since I was 14 years old. The private version is that I work 16-hour days because going home to an empty penthouse makes me want to scream. The private version is that I have 4,000 people who depend on me and not one single person I depend on. I built an empire because I couldn't build a life. And I told myself the empire was the life, and I believed that lie for a very long time." "When did you stop believing it?" 3 weeks ago, when my father sat me down and explained that the reason I can't let anyone close is because the first person I ever let close was ripped away from me by the person I trusted most. Turns out that does something to you. Who knew? The bitterness in her voice was not directed at him. It was directed inward, at herself, at the years she had lost, at the version of her life she might have lived if a man in a big house hadn't decided he knew better. "Your turn," she said. "My turn?" 20 years, the real version. Nathan set his mug down. The coffee really was terrible. "I met Claire when I was 22. She was a nurse. We got married when I was 24. Lily came a year later. Claire got diagnosed when Lily was 5, ovarian. It moved fast." He paused. "She died when Lily was 7. That was 3 years ago. I've been doing this alone since then." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She was good. The best person I've ever known. She deserved better than what she got." "Better than you?" "Better than dying at 29. Isabella looked at him across the kitchen island, and he could see her processing this. The dead wife, the young daughter, the years of solitary parenthood. He could see her calculating the distance between his life and hers, and he could see the exact moment when the calculation produced a result she hadn't expected. "You loved her," Isabella said. Not a question. "Very much." "Good." She said it simply, without jealousy, without resentment. "I'm glad you had that." "Isabella?" "No, I mean it. I spent 20 years being angry at a ghost, at the version of you my father invented, the version who had moved on and forgotten me and said horrible things about my family. And the whole time, the real you was here, building a life, loving someone, raising a daughter. I'm glad, truly, even though it hurts to know what I missed." He didn't know what to say to that, so he said the only honest thing he could. "I never stopped thinking about you." The words came out before he could stop them, and once they were in the air, he couldn't take them back. They sat between them on the kitchen island like something physical, solid, undeniable, taking up space. "Even with Claire," he continued, because he was already in it, already past the point of retreat. "Even when I was happy, and I was happy, I want to be clear about that. There was always this space, this gap, like a room in a house that you keep the door closed to because you don't know what to do with it. I never went in there, but I always knew it was there." Isabella set her mug down. Her hands were trembling slightly. She noticed and pressed them flat against the countertop, as if she could will them still. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Okay." "When I found out the truth, when my father told me everything, the first thing I felt wasn't anger, it wasn't betrayal, it wasn't grief. The first thing I felt was relief." Her voice cracked on the last word. "Relief, Nathan, because for 20 years I believed you had chosen to leave me, that I wasn't enough, that everything we had was real only to me. And finding out it was a lie, finding out that you hadn't chosen to leave, it was the best thing I had felt in 20 years. And I hate myself for that. I hate that my first reaction to discovering my father destroyed our lives was relief that you hadn't done it voluntarily." That's not something to hate yourself for. It feels like it is. It's not. It's the most human reaction I can think of. She looked at him, and her eyes were wet now. Not crying, not yet, but close, balanced on the edge. And Nathan felt something shift in his chest. Not the old feeling, not the adolescent electricity, but something deeper and more dangerous. A recognition, a sense of seeing someone clearly, fully, without illusion, and wanting to move closer anyway. I should go, he said. Lily gets out of her after-school program at 5:30. Right, of course. Isabella straightened, reassembled. He watched the CEO snap back into place like armor being buckled on, and he understood for the first time how exhausting it must be to wear that armor every single day. Can I? She stopped. Started again. Would it be okay if I came to see you? Not here, at your place or somewhere, a restaurant. I don't care where. Why? Because I don't want to only see you in this house. This house is where everything went wrong. I want to see you somewhere that isn't haunted. He thought about his apartment, the clunking radiator, the small table, the evidence of a modest life lived in a modest space. And he thought about Isabella Vaughn sitting in that space, surrounded by all of it, and what that would mean. Friday, he said. Come for dinner. Lily and I eat at 6:30. It won't be fancy. I don't want fancy. Good, because you're getting spaghetti. Something happened to her face then, something small and unguarded. Not a smile, not exactly, but a loosening. The first crack in the professional facade that wasn't caused by pain. I love spaghetti, she said. You used to love sour gummy worms. People change. Not about spaghetti. He left the estate and drove south, back into the city, back into the density and noise and crumbling infrastructure of the world he actually inhabited. The contrast hit him every time. The transition from the manicured silence of the North Shore to the aggressive realness of the city, where everything was loud and close and slightly broken and completely alive. He picked up Lily on time, made grilled cheese for dinner because the spaghetti was earmarked for Friday now, and he needed to go grocery shopping. They ate together at the small table, and Lily talked about a science project involving bean plants, and he listened with the part of his brain that was always available for her, while the other part turned over the conversation with Isabella like a stone he couldn't stop examining. Dad? Lily said. Yeah? You're doing the face again. What face? The thinking face. The one where you look like you're trying to solve a really hard math problem, but the math problem is about feelings. He stared at her. That's an incredibly specific observation. I'm incredibly observant. Mrs. Henderson says so. Mrs. Henderson is right. So what's the feelings math problem? He put down his grilled cheese. His daughter was looking at him with those steady brown eyes, Claire's eyes, and he felt the familiar pull between protecting her from the mess of adult life and respecting her enough to be honest. An old friend is going through a hard time, he said. I'm trying to figure out how to help. The person from the other night? The one who knocked? Yeah. Is she okay? Not really. Her dad is sick. Lily's face shifted. At 12, she already knew what sick meant when adults said it in that particular tone. She had learned the vocabulary of loss earlier than most kids. Cancer. Hospital. Treatment. The words that preceded absence. That's really sad, she said. It is. Are you going to help her? I'm trying. Good. You're good at helping people. That's literally your whole job. My job is fixing garbage disposals. Same thing. After dinner, after homework, after the nightly negotiation about bedtime that Lily always won by exactly 15 minutes, Nathan sat on the couch in the dark again. But tonight was different from the other nights. Tonight, instead of turning the card over in his hands, he was thinking about Friday, about Isabella sitting at his table, about what Lily would think of her and what she would think of Lily and whether any of this was a good idea or whether he was walking straight into something that would hurt everyone involved. The radiator whined, the wind blew. He sat there for a long time. Friday came faster than he wanted. He cleaned the apartment, really cleaned it, not the surface level tidying he did when his mother visited, but the deep, slightly obsessive cleaning of a man who had suddenly become aware of every scuff mark and dust bunny in his home. He scrubbed the kitchen counters. He organized the pile of mail on the table. He spent 10 minutes trying to make the radiator look less terrible, and then gave up because there was no making a 1970s cast iron radiator look anything other than exactly what it was. Lily watched all of this with naked fascination. "Who's coming over?" she asked. "A friend." "You don't have friends." "That's not true. Dad, name one friend who's been to this apartment in the last year." He opened his mouth, closed it. "Dave from work came to pick up a drill." "That doesn't count." "Why not?" "Because tool exchanges aren't friendship. Who's coming over?" "Her name is Isabella. She's someone I knew a long time ago." "Before Mom?" The question landed softly, but Nathan felt the weight of it. "Yes, before Mom. We were kids." "Like dating kids?" "We were 12, Lily. 12-year-olds date. Tyler Hoffman and Madison Park have been dating since October." "That's terrifying." "You're changing the subject." "Yes, I am. Set the table, please. 3 plates." Lily set the table with the exaggerated precision of someone who wanted it noted for the record that she was being cooperative. 3 plates, 3 forks, 3 glasses. She even folded the paper napkins, which she had never done before in her life. "This isn't a big deal," Nathan said, mostly to himself. "You cleaned behind the refrigerator, Dad. You've never cleaned behind the refrigerator. This is a huge deal." At 6:25, there was a knock at the door. Nathan opened it. Isabella was standing in the hallway wearing jeans and a gray sweater and boots that were probably expensive but looked deliberately casual. She was holding a paper bag. "I brought dessert," she said. "I didn't make it. I want to be clear about that. I bought it from a bakery because, as we've established, I am terrible in the kitchen." "What is it?" "Chocolate cake. Is that okay?" "I didn't know if Lily had allergies. I should have asked. I can—" "She doesn't have allergies. Come in." Isabella stepped into the apartment, and Nathan watched her take it in. The small rooms, the cluttered bookshelves, the framed photos on the wall, the radiator, the evidence of a life lived within means. He waited for something to cross her face. Judgment. Pity. The involuntary comparison between this and the estate where she had grown up. What crossed her face instead was something he hadn't expected. Longing. "It smells amazing," she said. "It's just spaghetti." "I know." Lily appeared from her room with the studied casualness of a 12-year-old who had definitely been listening from behind her door. "Hi, I'm Lily." "I'm Isabella. I brought cake." "I already like you." Nathan watched them shake hands, his daughter and this woman from his past, and something twisted in his chest. Not pain, something adjacent to it. Something that felt like the beginning of something he wasn't ready to name. They sat down to dinner. The spaghetti was good. It was the one thing Nathan could cook reliably, the recipe Claire had taught him early in their marriage, with garlic and olive oil and fresh basil when he could get it, canned when he couldn't. Isabella ate like someone who hadn't had a home-cooked meal in years, which, Nathan suspected, was probably the truth. The conversation started awkward and then, gradually, stopped being awkward. Lily was the catalyst. She asked Isabella questions with the fearless directness that only 12-year-olds and journalists possessed. "So what do you do?" Lily asked. "I run a company." "What kind of company?" "A big one. We do real estate and technology and pharmaceuticals." "Do you like it?" Isabella paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "Most days. Some days it feels like pushing a boulder uphill." "My dad says that about the radiator." Isabella laughed. Not the controlled professional laugh that Nathan had heard in interviews he had looked up online in the days since her return. A real laugh, sudden and unguarded, with a snort at the end that she immediately tried to cover with her hand. Lily grinned. "You snorted." "I did not." "You absolutely did. Dad, she snorted." "I heard." Isabella's face was red. Actually, red. A billionaire CEO sitting at his kitchen table with sauce on her fork and a blush on her cheeks and her composure in pieces around her. The rest of dinner was like that, easy in a way that surprised Nathan. Lily talked about school and her bean plant experiment and the bearded dragon named Kevin. Isabella asked questions that were specific and interested and not condescending, and Lily responded by opening up the way she only did with people she had decided to trust, which was a short list that Nathan had previously believed consisted exclusively of himself and her best friend Morgan. After dinner, Lily excused herself to do homework, and Nathan and Isabella sat at the table with the chocolate cake between them. "She's extraordinary," Isabella said quietly. "She's a handful." "That's the same thing." "Usually." Isabella cut herself a piece of cake. "She looks like someone." "Her mother." "She must have been beautiful." "She was." They ate cake. The silence between them was different from the silences at the estate, less heavy, less loaded with history and institutional weight. This silence was the comfortable kind, the kind that happens between two people who have run out of things they need to say and haven't yet started saying the things they want to. "Thank you for this," Isabella said. "For spaghetti?" "For letting me in, literally and otherwise." Nathan looked at her across his small table, in his small apartment, with the radiator whining and the cake crumbs on the plate, and the sound of Lily's pencil scratching faintly from the other room. "Isabella," he said. "Yeah. I'm glad you knocked." She looked at him, and this time she didn't try to hide what was on her face. The hope, the fear, the 20 years of loneliness pressing against the thin wall of composure she had built to contain it. "So am I," she said. He walked her to the door at 9. They stood in the narrow entryway, close enough that he could smell her perfume again. The same subtle, expensive scent from the first night, layered now with garlic and chocolate and the warm domestic smell of his apartment. "Friday again?" she asked. "Lily has a school thing next Friday." "Saturday?" "Saturday works." She nodded, pulled on her coat, opened the door. Then she stopped and turned back. "Nathan, I need to say something." "Okay. I'm not here because of what my father did. I'm not here out of guilt or obligation or some attempt to fix the past. I'm here because I want to be. I need you to know that." "I know." "Do you?" "Yeah," he said. "I do." She left. He closed the door and turned around, and Lily was standing in the hallway in her pajamas with her toothbrush in her hand. "I like her," Lily said. "Go brush your teeth." "She snorted, Dad. She's a real person." "Teeth. Now." Lily disappeared into the bathroom. Nathan stood in the entryway and pressed his forehead against the closed door and breathed. Something was happening. Something slow and careful and terrifying. Something that felt nothing like what he had felt at 12. No lightning, no fireworks, no adolescent certainty that everything would work out because it had to. This was quieter, more fragile, built on the wreckage of two lives that had been shaped by absence, held together by the tentative recognition that maybe, just maybe, the wreckage wasn't all there was. He was scared, genuinely, deeply scared, in a way he hadn't been since Claire's diagnosis, because caring about someone meant they could be taken away. He had learned that lesson in the most brutal way possible, and the scar tissue it left behind did not want to be disturbed. But Isabella had sat at his table and eaten his spaghetti and laughed so hard she snorted, and his daughter had declared her a real person, and something in him, something stubborn and reckless, and apparently immune to scar tissue, wanted to see her again. Saturday, he thought. Saturday. And the radiator whined, and the wind blew, and Nathan Cole stood in his apartment and felt, for the first time in longer than he could remember, that the walls he had built to keep himself safe might not be as strong as he thought. Saturday never happened. Nathan was standing in the cereal aisle at the grocery store on Friday afternoon, trying to decide between the brand Lily liked and the brand that was on sale, when his phone buzzed. Isabella's name on the screen. He answered and knew immediately from the silence, the half-second of nothing before she spoke, that something had changed. "He's gone," she said. "About an hour ago." Nathan put the cereal back on the shelf, both boxes. He stood in the aisle with fluorescent lights humming above him and a woman trying to reach past him for a box of granola and his phone pressed against his ear. "Where are you?" he asked. "The house. There are people here, the hospice team. His lawyer already called. There's a whole protocol, apparently. When someone like him dies, there's a protocol." Her voice was flat, not calm. flat. The difference mattered. Calm was a choice. Flat was what happened when you ran out of choices. "I'm coming," Nathan said. "You don't have to." "I'm coming." He called Lily's friend Morgan's mother, who agreed to take Lily for the evening without asking questions, because she was one of those parents who understood that sometimes adults needed other adults, and the best thing you could do was say yes and worry about the details later. Nathan dropped Lily off with a hug that lasted 3 seconds longer than usual. "Is it the friend?" Lily asked. "Isabella?" "Her dad passed away." Lily's face went still. She knew this landscape. She had walked through it herself. "Go," she said. "I'll be fine." He drove north. The traffic was lighter than usual, or maybe he was driving faster than usual, or maybe both. The sky was getting dark by the time he reached the gates, and this time he didn't pause, didn't sit in his truck, didn't give himself a minute to prepare. He parked and walked straight to the front door. A woman in a dark suit opened it. Not the same uniformed staff member from before, but someone new, someone with a clipboard and a phone and the efficient, slightly detached demeanor of a person whose job was to manage the logistics of death. She led him to a sitting room on the first floor that he hadn't seen before. Heavy furniture, dark wood, a fireplace with no fire in it. Isabella was sitting on a couch in the center of the room, not crying, not moving, just sitting, with her hands in her lap and her eyes fixed on a point somewhere on the opposite wall, as if she had found a spot that required no emotional processing and was determined to stare at it until the world went away. There were other people in the room. A man in a gray suit who was probably the lawyer, 2 women who might have been estate staff, someone on a phone near the window speaking in low tones about arrangements. But Isabella was alone in the way that mattered. Alone in the middle of a room full of people, the way only very powerful and very isolated people can be. Nathan crossed the room and sat down next to her, not close enough to touch, close enough that she could feel he was there. "The hospice nurse said it was peaceful," Isabella said, still looking at the wall. "That's the word she used, peaceful, like he fell asleep. I keep thinking about that word and trying to decide if it makes me feel better or worse. Does it have to be one or the other? Apparently not. Apparently it can be both at the same time. That's a fun discovery." Her voice was doing that thing again, the flat, controlled delivery that was 1 degree away from breaking. Nathan had heard that voice before. He had used it himself 3 years ago, standing in a hospital corridor while a doctor explained that Claire's body had stopped responding to treatment and that they should begin discussing comfort care. "What do you need?" Nathan asked. "I don't know. Everyone keeps asking me that. The lawyer needs decisions about the estate. The funeral director needs decisions about the service. The board needs a statement. Everyone needs something, and I don't know what I need. I don't even know what I feel. I think I'm angry, or sad, or relieved, or all 3. She finally looked at him. "Is that terrible? That part of me feels relieved?" "No. He was my father. He was a monster, and he was my father, and he's dead, and I feel relieved, and I feel guilty about feeling relieved, and I feel angry about feeling guilty. It's like emotional Russian nesting dolls." "Claire's mother told me something after the funeral," Nathan said. "She said grief isn't one feeling. It's every feeling you've ever had, showing up at the same time without an invitation. You don't have to sort them out tonight." Isabella looked at him for a long moment. Then something in her face shifted, not collapsed, not broke, but shifted, like a wall that had been holding back water and finally developed a crack too large to ignore. "I need everyone to leave," she said quietly. "Okay." "Not you, everyone else." Nathan stood up and walked to the man in the gray suit. "She needs the room," he said. "Everything else can wait until tomorrow." The lawyer started to object, something about time-sensitive documents, about notifications that needed to go out, about regulatory requirements. Nathan looked at him with an expression that was not hostile, but was absolutely final. "Tomorrow," Nathan repeated. The room emptied. The lawyer, the staff, the person on the phone. They filed out with varying degrees of reluctance, and Nathan closed the door behind them. And then it was just the 2 of them in the large, dark room with the cold fireplace and the heavy furniture and the absolute silence that follows death. Isabella sat on the couch for another 30 seconds. Then she put her face in her hands and cried. Not the elegant crying of movies, not the single tear rolling down a composed cheek. This was ugly crying, the kind with sounds, with shaking shoulders, with breath that came in ragged gasps that sounded like they hurt. She cried the way someone cries when they have been holding it together for weeks or months or years, and the thing they were holding it together for has finally ended, and there is no more reason to hold anything together at all. Nathan sat beside her and did nothing. He did not put his arm around her. He did not say it would be okay. He did not offer platitudes or wisdom or comfort. He just sat there, present, solid, available, and let her fall apart in whatever way she needed to fall apart. It lasted a long time, long enough that the light in the room changed as the last of the dusk faded and the windows went dark, long enough that Nathan's back started to ache from the rigid way he was sitting, long enough that the sound she was making changed from the raw, gasping sobs of the beginning to the quieter, exhausted crying of someone who has used up everything they have and is running on empty. Eventually, she stopped. Not because she was finished, but because the body has limits, and she had reached hers. She sat with her face in her hands, and her breathing slowly steadied, and the room was very quiet. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't. I just fell apart in front of you." "Yeah, that's allowed." She lifted her head. Her face was a mess, red, swollen, mascara tracked down her cheeks in dark lines. She looked nothing like the woman on magazine covers. She looked nothing like a CEO. She looked like a person who had lost her father and didn't know how to carry it. "I'm not crying because I miss him," she said. "That's the worst part. I'm crying because I never got to have the father I wanted. The one who died today. The real one. The one who lied and manipulated and controlled everything. I've been grieving for the version of him that didn't exist, the one I invented in my head, the father who loved me without conditions. He was never real, Nathan, and now he never will be." Nathan understood this. He understood it in a way that was specific and painful, because he had done the same thing with Isabella. Spent 20 years grieving a version of their story that wasn't real, mourning an abandonment that never happened, building his identity around a wound that was manufactured. "You don't have to figure out what you feel about him tonight," Nathan said, "or this month, or this year. You just have to get through tonight." "How did you do it?" "When Claire died?" "Badly. I did it badly. I ate cereal for dinner for 3 months and forgot to pay the electric bill twice, and once dropped Lily off at school on a Saturday because I lost track of what day it was." "That doesn't sound badly. That sounds like surviving." "Same thing sometimes." She leaned back against the couch cushions and closed her eyes. The exhaustion was visible now, etched into every line of her face. She looked like someone who had been running for a very long time and had finally been given permission to stop. "Stay," she said. "Please. I don't want to be alone in this house tonight." "Okay." He texted Morgan's mother, asked if Lily could sleep over. Received a response in 12 seconds. "Of course. Take your time." He put his phone away and looked around the room. The dark wood, the heavy curtains, the paintings that probably cost more than everything he owned combined. "Have you eaten?" he asked. "I don't remember." "That means no. Where's the kitchen?" She almost laughed. Almost. The ghost of it crossed her face and vanished. "Which one?" "The one with food in it." She led him to the kitchen they had used before, the large one with the island and the professional appliances. He opened the refrigerator and found it stocked with the kind of food that wealthy people kept on hand: fresh vegetables, expensive cheese, things in containers with handwritten labels that suggested a personal chef had been here recently. Nathan was not a chef. Nathan could make spaghetti, grilled cheese, scrambled eggs, and a serviceable chili that Lily rated fine. But he could also make toast, and sometimes toast was exactly what the moment called for. He made toast, 4 slices, buttered, with a pot of tea because the coffee maker in this kitchen looked like it required an engineering degree, and he wasn't about to ask Isabella to operate heavy machinery in her current state. They sat at the kitchen island and ate toast and drank tea and didn't talk much. The house was quiet around them, the vast, expensive quiet of a place built to impress rather than comfort. Nathan thought about his apartment, about the clunking radiator and the neighbor's TV and the ambient noise of a building where people lived on top of each other and couldn't avoid the evidence of each other's existence. He missed it, the noise, the mess, the proof of life. He changed his will, Isabella said suddenly. What? 3 weeks ago, after he told me the truth. He called his lawyer and changed his will. I don't know the details yet. The reading is next week, but the lawyer mentioned something when he arrived tonight. Something about you. About me? He wouldn't say more, just that your name was in it. Nathan set his toast down. I don't want anything from him. I know. Whatever it is, whatever he left, I don't want it. I know that too, but you should probably hear what it is before you decide. He picked up his toast again, took a bite, chewed. The butter was salted, which he preferred, though he had never bought salted butter in his life because it cost 50 cents more than unsalted, and 50 cents was 50 cents. Tell me something about him, Nathan said. Something that doesn't have to do with what he did to us. Isabella was quiet for a while. She held her tea with both hands, the way she had held the terrible coffee last time, and stared into the cup as if the answer might be floating in it. He used to read to me, she said, when I was little, every night. He'd come into my room and sit on the edge of my bed and read whatever book I was into at the time. He did the voices, all of them, the witches, the dragons, the talking animals, this enormous, terrifying man sitting on a pink bedspread, doing a squeaky mouse voice. She paused. He stopped when I was about 10. I asked him once why he stopped, and he said I was too old for bedtime stories. But I think the real reason was that he knew what he was about to do, separating me from you. And he couldn't sit on my bed and read to me and look me in the eye at the same time. That's the worst thing you've told me, Nathan said, including everything else. Why? Because it means he knew it was wrong. The whole time. He knew. Isabella put her tea down. Yeah, she said. He knew. They sat together in the kitchen of the dead man's house until after midnight. They didn't solve anything. They didn't have a breakthrough conversation or a cathartic moment of shared healing. They just sat there, two people with too much history and too many open wounds, eating toast and drinking tea and being present with each other in the specific way that only people who have both experienced loss can manage. Nathan slept on the couch in the sitting room. Isabella brought him a blanket and a pillow, both absurdly soft, the kind of bedding that probably had a thread count you could brag about at dinner parties, and said goodnight with a formality that would have been funny under different circumstances. The bathroom is the second door on the left, she said. I'll find it. There are towels in the cabinet. Okay. Nathan. Yeah? Thank you. For staying. Good night, Isabella. He lay on the couch in the dark in a house that was worth more than he could comprehend and listened to the silence. No radiator clunking, no neighbor's TV, no garbage trucks in the alley. Just silence, deep, padded, expensive silence, the kind that money bought. He did not sleep well, but he stayed. The funeral was 4 days later. It was held at a private estate on the lake, because even in death, Richard Vaughn could not do anything small. 300 people attended, business associates, politicians, philanthropists, people whose names appeared in newspapers and on the sides of buildings. Nathan wore his only suit, dark blue, slightly too tight in the shoulders because he had bought it for Claire's funeral and had been in worse shape then, thinner from the months of hospital vigils and grief that ate appetite. Lily came with him. She wore a black dress that they had bought the day before at a department store, and she looked older in it, which unsettled Nathan in a way he tried not to examine. She held his hand during the service, which she hadn't done in public in over a year, and he understood that she was doing it for him, not for herself. Isabella delivered the eulogy. She stood at the front of the room in a black dress and spoke about her father with a precision that impressed and disturbed Nathan in equal measure. She talked about his business accomplishments, his philanthropic contributions, his vision for the company. She mentioned his love of first edition books and his habit of waking before dawn to read the financial reports before anyone else. She was eloquent and controlled, and she did not mention a single personal thing, not the bedtime stories, not the voices, not any of the complicated, contradictory truth of who he actually was. It was, Nathan thought, the eulogy of a CEO mourning a chairman, not a daughter mourning a father. Afterward, there was a reception. White tablecloths, catered food, wine that Nathan was sure cost more per bottle than his grocery budget for the week. People approached Isabella in a steady stream, handshakes, condolences, the choreographed sympathy of the wealthy and powerful. She received it all with the same composed, impenetrable expression, thanking each person, nodding at the right moments, saying the right things. Nathan stood near the back with Lily and watched. "She looks tired," Lily said. "She is." "Why is she talking to all those people if she's tired?" "Because they expect her to." "That's dumb." "Yeah." "Can we go get her?" Nathan looked at his daughter. "What do you mean, get her?" "Like, rescue her. She looks like she wants someone to rescue her." He considered this. His 12-year-old daughter, with her mother's eyes and her mother's instinct for seeing what other people needed, standing in a room full of powerful strangers and identifying the one person who needed help. "Okay," he said, "let's go get her." They walked across the room together, the maintenance supervisor and his 7th grader, weaving through a crowd of people who probably had more money collectively than some small nations. Lily walked with purpose, unbothered by any of it, because she was 12 and 12-year-olds had not yet learned to be intimidated by wealth. They reached Isabella just as a silver-haired man in a $3,000 suit was explaining how much her father had meant to the industry. "Excuse me," Lily said, looking up at the man with polite finality. "We need to borrow her." The man blinked. Isabella blinked. Nathan did not blink because he had learned long ago that the best strategy when Lily did something unexpected was to act like it was completely planned. "I'm sorry," Isabella said to the man. "Family." The word hung in the air for a moment. "Family," said casually, reflexively, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Nathan watched it register on Isabella's face. The realization of what she had just said, the flash of something vulnerable behind her composed exterior. They moved to a quieter corner of the room. Lily positioned herself between them like a small, determined bodyguard. "Thank you," Isabella said. "I was drowning." "Lily's idea," Nathan said. "You looked stuck," Lily said. "Like when Dad gets cornered by Mrs. Kowalski in the laundry room and she talks about her hip replacement for 45 minutes. Isabella made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. She pressed her hand to her mouth and closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, they were wet. "Can we leave?" she asked Nathan. "Is that allowed? Can I leave my own father's funeral?" "You can do whatever you want." "I want to leave." "Then we leave." They left through a side door. The three of them, Nathan, Isabella, and Lily, walked out into the January cold and stood in a parking lot next to Nathan's truck, which looked spectacularly out of place among the town cars and luxury sedans. Isabella stood in the cold air and breathed. In and out, like someone who had been underwater and had finally broken the surface. "I just gave the eulogy for a man who destroyed my life," she said, "and I didn't say one true thing about him. Not one. I talked about his business legacy and his philanthropy, and I didn't say a single word about what he actually did." "What kind of person does that?" "The kind who isn't ready," Nathan said. "And that's fine." "It's not fine, it's cowardly." "It's Tuesday. You can be brave on Wednesday." She looked at him with an expression he couldn't fully read. Gratitude and exhaustion, and something else, something that lived underneath both. "Can we go to your apartment?" she asked. "I know that's strange. I know we just left a funeral, but I can't go back to that house right now, and I can't go to my penthouse, and I just need to be somewhere that feels real," Lily offered. Isabella looked down at her. "Yeah," she said, "real." They drove back to the city in Nathan's truck, 3 across the bench seat, Lily in the middle because the passenger side seatbelt had a quirk that required a specific angle to click, and Nathan didn't trust anyone but himself to manage it. The heater worked intermittently. The radio was tuned to a station playing oldies that none of them had chosen. Isabella sat with her forehead against the cold window and watched Chicago slide past. The expressway, the exits, the neighborhoods stacking up against each other, dense and loud and real in exactly the way the North Shore estate was not. They reached the apartment. Nathan made grilled cheese because it was simple and warm, and it was the only thing he could think to do. Lily set the table without being asked. 3 plates, 3 forks, 3 glasses, same as before. The radiator clunked. The neighbor's TV played its muffled laugh track. The apartment was small and warm and full of the accumulated evidence of two people who loved each other and were doing their best. Isabella sat at the table and ate a grilled cheese sandwich in a black funeral dress and did not speak for a long time. Lily filled the silence with a detailed account of the bearded dragon Kevin's latest adventures, which now included an escape attempt and a confrontation with the school janitor. Nathan listened and nodded and watched Isabella out of the corner of his eye, watching her shoulders slowly drop, watching the rigid funeral posture gradually soften into something more human. After dinner, Lily went to her room to read, and Nathan and Isabella sat at the table in the quiet. "The will reading is Thursday," Isabella said. "You mentioned. Will you come?" "Isabella, I know you don't want anything from him. I'm not asking you to want anything. I'm asking you to be there, with me. Because I can't walk into that room full of lawyers and accountants alone. I'm not strong enough. You're the strongest person I know. No, I'm the most practiced. There's a difference." He looked at her across the table. This woman who ran a billion-dollar company, who testified before Senate committees, who had held herself together through a confession and a death and a funeral without cracking where anyone could see. "I'll be there," he said. "Thank you. Stop thanking me." "I'll stop thanking you when you stop earning it." Thursday came. The will reading took place in a conference room at a law firm downtown, the kind of law firm that occupied 3 floors of a glass tower and had more lawyers than Nathan's entire apartment building had residents. There were 6 people around the table: Isabella, Nathan, the gray-suited lawyer from the night Richard died, 2 associates with tablets, and a woman who was introduced as the executor of the estate. The will was long, detailed, full of provisions for trusts and foundations and corporate governance structures that Nathan didn't understand and didn't try to. He sat in his chair and listened and waited for the part that had his name in it, which came near the end. The lawyer read it aloud. The Vaughn estate, the house on the North Shore, the grounds, all structures and contents, was to be left jointly to Isabella Vaughn and Nathan Cole. The room was quiet. Nathan looked at Isabella. She was staring at the lawyer with an expression that suggested she had known this was coming but hadn't been able to prepare for the reality of hearing it said aloud. "Jointly," Nathan said. "Yes," the lawyer confirmed, "equal ownership, with a provision that any decision regarding the property, sale, renovation, repurposing, must be agreed upon by both parties." "He's still doing it," Isabella said quietly. "Even dead, he's still making decisions for us." Nathan sat with that. The absurdity of it, the cruelty of it, the strange, twisted logic of a dying man who had spent 20 years keeping 2 people apart, and then, in his final act, had bound them together with a piece of real estate worth more money than Nathan could conceptualize. "We'll sell it," Isabella said. "Obviously." "Obviously," Nathan agreed. The lawyer made a note. The associates typed on their tablets. The meeting continued. There were other provisions, other details, other numbers that meant nothing to Nathan, and everything to the people whose job it was to manage the dead man's empire. Afterward, standing on the sidewalk outside the law firm, in the January wind, Isabella turned to him. "I mean it. We sell it. We split whatever it's worth, and we move on." "Agreed." "I don't want his house. I don't want anything that was his." "I don't either." "Good. Then that's settled." But she didn't move. She stood on the sidewalk with the wind pulling at her coat and the city grinding past them, cabs and buses, and people walking fast with their heads down against the cold. And she didn't move. "It's not settled, is it?" Nathan said. "No," she admitted. "It's really not." Because nothing was settled. Not the house, not the will, not whatever was happening between them. Richard Vaughn had spent his life arranging other people's futures. And his final arrangement, this forced partnership, this shared ownership of the place where everything had started and everything had gone wrong, was either the last act of a controlling man who couldn't stop controlling, or it was something else. An apology, a push, a dying man's attempt to undo the one thing he could never undo in life. Nathan didn't know which. He suspected it was both. "Come on," he said. "I'll buy you a coffee, a real one. From a place that knows what they're doing." "That's a direct attack on my coffee-making skills." Your coffee-making skills deserve to be attacked." She laughed. A small laugh, but real. And they walked down the sidewalk together, into the wind, into the cold, into the complicated, unsettled, uncharted territory of whatever came next. The coffee shop was called Marlowe's, and it was the kind of place that had existed on the same corner for 30 years without ever updating the decor or the menu or the attitude of the woman behind the counter, who treated every customer like they were mildly inconveniencing her by existing. Nathan had been coming here since Lily was a baby, back when he would push the stroller in with one hand and order a black coffee with the other and sit in the corner booth feeding Lily Cheerios off the tray while the world outside the window did whatever it was going to do without his input. They didn't sell the estate that week. Or the week after. It started with logistics. The property required appraisals, inspections, environmental assessments, things that took time and generated paperwork, and required meetings with people who charged $400 an hour to explain things that could have been explained in a single paragraph. Isabella handled most of it because she had lawyers and accountants and an entire corporate infrastructure designed to manage exactly this kind of complexity. But every decision required both signatures, and every signature required a conversation, and every conversation lasted longer than it needed to. At first they met at the law firm, then at a coffee shop closer to Isabella's office downtown, then at Marlowe's because Nathan mentioned it once and Isabella showed up the next day and ordered a black coffee, and the woman behind the counter looked at her with the same mild disdain she showed everyone, and Isabella said afterward that it was the most normal she had felt in months. "This place is terrible," Isabella said, sitting across from Nathan in the corner booth on a Tuesday morning in early February, holding a cup of coffee that was strong and hot and utterly without pretension. "The chairs are uncomfortable. The coffee is average. There's a crack in the window." "So why do you keep coming back?" "Because nobody here knows who I am, or cares. That woman at the register looked at me like I was wasting her time. Do you know how long it's been since someone treated me like I was wasting their time? That's Dolores. She treats everyone like that. It's not personal." "I know, that's why I like it." They met at Marlowe's 3, 4, sometimes 5 times a week. The estate paperwork was the excuse, but the paperwork stopped being the reason somewhere around the second week of February, when they spent an entire hour talking about a documentary Isabella had watched about deep-sea fish, and Nathan had said he didn't understand why anyone would voluntarily go to the bottom of the ocean, and Isabella had said it wasn't about the destination, it was about knowing what was down there. And Nathan had said that was exactly the kind of thing a person who had never been poor would say, because poor people didn't have the luxury of exploring for the sake of knowing. They explored for the sake of eating. And Isabella had laughed so hard that Dolores looked over from behind the counter with an expression of genuine alarm. They talked about everything. And they talked about nothing. They talked about Lily's science project, which had progressed from bean plants to an ambitious experiment involving mold growth that Nathan was deeply skeptical about, but supportive of in the way that fathers were supportive of things they secretly found disgusting. They talked about Isabella's company, about the meetings and the spreadsheets, and the relentless pressure of being the person at the top of a pyramid that employed 4,000 people. They talked about Claire, carefully, honestly, without Nathan softening who she was, or Isabella pretending she didn't feel complicated about the woman who had lived the life she might have had. "Were you happy?" Isabella asked once, on a gray morning when the window crack was letting in a thin whistle of wind. "With Claire, were you actually happy, or were you just functional?" Nathan considered this. "Both," he said, "and I don't think those are as far apart as people pretend. I was happy. I was also tired and scared and worried about money every single month, and sometimes so frustrated I wanted to put my fist through the wall. But underneath all of that, yeah, I was happy. She made me happy. Lily made me happy. The life we built was small and hard and mine, and I loved it. That's the most honest thing anyone's ever said to me about marriage." Most people aren't honest about marriage. They're either selling you the fairy tale or warning you off the cliff. The truth is somewhere in the middle, and the middle isn't very interesting at dinner parties. Isabella smiled. Not the public smile, the private one. The one that showed up only when she forgot to manage her face. "I've never been to a dinner party where anyone told the truth about anything." "That's because you go to rich people dinner parties." "What happens at regular people dinner parties?" Someone brings a casserole and everyone drinks too much wine, and by 10 o'clock someone's crying about their ex in the bathroom. Much more honest. That sounds wonderful. It's really not. But she was laughing, and he was laughing, and Dolores was ignoring them both with professional indifference, and outside the cracked window Chicago was doing its thing, cold, loud, indifferent, alive. The weeks passed. February became March. The days got slightly longer, though the cold didn't relent. Isabella started coming to Nathan's apartment for dinner on Fridays. It had become a standing thing, unspoken, unnegotiated, as natural as gravity. She brought dessert from the same bakery every time. Chocolate cake. Lily had declared it the best chocolate cake in the city, and Isabella had accepted this verdict with a seriousness that suggested she had just closed a major deal. The dinners changed things. Not dramatically, not in the way of movies where a single evening transforms everything. They changed things the way water changes stone. Slowly, persistently, one meal at a time. Isabella learned where the plates were kept. She learned that the third drawer stuck and you had to lift it slightly to get it open. She learned that Lily hated mushrooms with an intensity that bordered on philosophical, and that Nathan always burned the garlic because he got distracted talking and forgot to stir. And Lily changed things most of all. She did it without trying, without strategy, with the unself-conscious directness of a child who had decided that a person belonged in her life, and therefore that person belonged. She showed Isabella her bean plant experiment, which had entered a phase that Nathan privately described as horrifying, and Lily described as science. She asked Isabella for help with her history homework because Isabella actually knew things about the Industrial Revolution that weren't just copied from the textbook. She started texting Isabella memes, like the kind of memes that 12-year-olds thought were hilarious and adults couldn't understand, and Isabella responded to every single one as if decoding them was the most important task on her schedule. One Friday in mid-March, Nathan came out of the kitchen to find Isabella and Lily sitting on the living room floor with a jigsaw puzzle spread between them. It was a 1,000-piece puzzle of a lighthouse that Lily had gotten for her birthday and had been languishing unfinished on the bookshelf for months. "We're doing the sky," Lily announced. "Isabella says you should always do the hardest part first." "That's a business philosophy, not a puzzle strategy," Nathan said. "It works for both," Isabella said, fitting a piece into place with a click. "The sky is all the same color, so if you can do that, everything else feels manageable by comparison." "Like fractions," Lily said. "Exactly like fractions." Nathan leaned against the doorframe and watched them. Isabella was sitting cross-legged on his living room floor in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, a smear of chocolate from the cake on her wrist that she hadn't noticed. Lily was next to her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, sorting edge pieces with the focused intensity she usually reserved for video games. Something tightened in Nathan's chest. Not pain, not the old grief. Something newer and more frightening. The slow dawning recognition that this woman had become part of his life. Not as a visitor, not as a guest, but as someone whose absence would now be felt, whose chair at the table would now look empty if she wasn't in it. He was falling in love with her. He knew that. He had known it for weeks, probably, had felt it building in the small moments. The way she passed him the salt before he asked for it, the way she remembered which mug was his without being told, the way she said Lily's name with an easy familiarity that sounded like home. But knowing it and admitting it were different things, and admitting it meant accepting the risk that came with it, and the risk was enormous, and he was a man who had already lost once, and wasn't sure he could survive losing again. So he stood in the doorframe and watched, and said nothing, and let the feeling exist without naming it. Isabella started spending Saturdays at the apartment too. Not every Saturday. She still had a company to run, still flew to New York and San Francisco and London for meetings that involved numbers Nathan couldn't fathom. But most Saturdays, she would arrive in the morning with coffee from Marlowe's, which she now preferred to anything her personal chef could produce, and they would spend the day doing ordinary things. Grocery shopping, laundry, walking through the neighborhood while Lily ran ahead and Nathan and Isabella walked side by side, not touching, talking about whatever came to mind. It was during one of these walks, on a Saturday in late March, when the first faint suggestion of spring was in the air. Not warmth, not yet, but a softening, a loosening of winter's grip, that Isabella said something that stopped Nathan in the middle of the sidewalk. "I don't want to sell the estate." He looked at her. "What?" "I've been thinking about it for weeks, and I don't want to sell it." "Isabella, 2 months ago you said you didn't want anything that was his." "I know what I said. I was angry. I'm still angry. But I've been thinking about what that place could be if it wasn't his anymore. If it was something else." "Something else like what?" She didn't answer immediately. They were standing on a sidewalk in his neighborhood, surrounded by 3 flats and corner stores and the low-level chaos of a Saturday morning in a working-class part of Chicago. A kid rode past on a bike. A woman was sweeping her front stoop. Somewhere a dog was barking with the committed enthusiasm of an animal that had found something important to bark at. "A scholarship foundation," Isabella said, "for disadvantaged students. Kids who are limited by the same things that your father was limited by, and my father couldn't see past. Poverty, family pressure, circumstances they didn't choose. We turn the estate into a foundation that gives those kids a way out. We use his money, the money he spent his whole life hoarding and controlling, and we give it away to the exact kind of people he spent his whole life looking down on." Nathan stared at her. "I know it sounds," she started. "It sounds right." "Really?" "It sounds exactly right." They stood on the sidewalk and looked at each other, and something passed between them. Not the old electricity, not the adolescent charge, but something deeper. A shared understanding, a recognition that they had been given something terrible, a legacy of manipulation, a jointly owned monument to one man's cruelty, and that they had the power to turn it into something meaningful. "We'd need a board," Isabella said, "a real one. Not my father's old colleagues, people who actually understand what it means to struggle." "I know people," Nathan said. "Guys I work with, parents from Lily's school, people who've been through it." "Good. I'll handle the legal structure. You handle the heart." "The heart?" "The foundation needs to actually mean something, Nathan. It can't just be a tax shelter with a nice name. It needs to help real people with real problems. And I'm very good at building structures and very bad at understanding what real people need. That's your job." He almost argued. Almost said that she was selling herself short, that the woman who sat on his living room floor doing jigsaw puzzles and texting memes to his daughter was perfectly capable of understanding what real people needed. But he didn't, because she was right. There was a gap between her experience and the experience of the people they wanted to help, and pretending that gap didn't exist wouldn't serve anyone. "Okay," he said. "I'll handle the heart." They kept walking. Lily circled back on her bike and said she was hungry, and could they please go to the place that made the good pancakes, and Isabella said she'd never been there, and Lily said that was unacceptable, and they went. The pancake place was called Gio's, and it was run by a man named Gio who had no last name that anyone knew, and who made pancakes the size of dinner plates, and treated his regular customers like family members he was mildly disappointed in. Lily ordered chocolate chip. Nathan ordered plain. Isabella ordered blueberry and ate the entire stack with an intensity that suggested she had been deprived of good pancakes for decades, which, Nathan realized, she probably had. You could not become the youngest female billionaire CEO in the country by eating pancakes on Saturday mornings. Something had to give, and what had given was everything normal, everything simple, everything that made a life feel like a life instead of a performance. They walked home from Gio's, the 3 of them, Lily in the middle now because she had gotten off her bike and was walking it with one hand while gesticulating with the other about something that had happened at school involving Kevin the bearded dragon and a substitute teacher who was apparently terrified of reptiles. Isabella was laughing, not the restrained professional laugh, the real one, the one with the snort. Nathan watched her and felt the thing he had been refusing to name press against his chest with an insistence that was getting harder and harder to ignore. That night, after Lily was in bed and Isabella was getting ready to leave, they stood in the narrow entryway the way they always did, close together because the space demanded it, facing each other because there was nowhere else to face. "Nathan," Isabella said. "Yeah. We need to talk about something." "I know." "Do you know what?" "Yeah, I think I do." She looked at him. In the dim light of the entryway, with her coat half on and her hair still in the messy ponytail from the puzzle and the walks and the pancakes, she looked tired and real and imperfect and beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with perfection. "I'm scared," she said. "Me too. I've spent my entire adult life protecting myself from this, from wanting someone, from needing someone. I built a company instead of a life because a company can't leave you. A company can't decide you're not enough. A company just needs you to show up and perform, and the performance is all there is." "Isabella, let me finish, please. I've been practicing this in my head for 3 weeks, and if I stop, I'll lose my nerve." He waited. "I am falling in love with you," she said. "Again, or still. I can't tell which. Maybe it never stopped. Maybe it just went underground for 20 years and grew roots, and now it's breaking through the surface, and I can't contain it anymore. And I don't want to contain it, but I am absolutely terrified that if I let it out, if I say it, if I name it, then the universe will take it away because that's what happened last time." "Last time wasn't the universe. Last time was your father." "I know, but the result was the same. I lost you. And losing you, or losing who I thought you were, was the thing that broke me. Not the company or the pressure or the loneliness. Losing you. That was the fracture that everything else grew out of. And if I let myself have this again and it doesn't work—" "Isabella." "What? I'm not going anywhere." She looked at him, and he saw the exact moment when the wall came down. Not all of it, not completely, because walls like that didn't disappear in a single conversation. But enough. Enough that he could see behind it, see the person who had been hiding there for 20 years, waiting. "You can't promise that," she said. "You're right. I can't." Claire couldn't promise that either, and she meant every word she ever said to me. Life doesn't come with guarantees. I learned that the hard way. "But I can promise you something else." "What?" "I can promise that I'm not going to pretend this isn't happening. I'm not going to hide behind being scared. I've been doing that for 3 years, hiding behind the fear, telling myself that keeping Lily safe and keeping the apartment standing and keeping my head above water was enough. And it was enough. For a while. But it's not enough anymore. You showed up at my door and everything I had been pretending was fine stopped being fine. And I can either admit that, or I can spend the rest of my life in this apartment listening to the radiator clunk and telling myself I'm okay. Are you okay?" "No, but I'm done pretending I am." They stood in the entryway. The apartment was quiet. Lily was asleep. The radiator, as if on cue, produced a single, definitive clunk. "We're going to screw this up," Isabella said. "You know that, right? We're two emotionally damaged people with decades of baggage and a dead wife and a dead father and a 12-year-old and a billion-dollar company and a jointly owned estate that we're turning into a scholarship fund. This is going to be a mess." "Probably." "I don't do messes. I do quarterly projections and strategic plans and 5-year forecasts." "Well, I do messes. Messes are literally my profession. I fix broken things for a living." She laughed, the real laugh, the snort. And then she kissed him. Not the way people kiss in movies. No dramatic music, no perfect lighting, no slow-motion camera pan. She kissed him in a narrow entryway that smelled like spaghetti sauce with her coat half on and her ponytail falling apart. And it was clumsy and a little off-center, and his nose bumped her glasses. She was wearing glasses now, reading glasses she put on when she was tired and forgot to take off. And it was absolutely, completely, imperfectly right. "That was terrible," she said, pulling back. "It really was. We should practice." "Probably." She kissed him again. It was better. Not perfect, but better. Afterward, she left. He closed the door and leaned against it and stood there in the entryway with his eyes closed and his heart doing something it hadn't done in years. Beating not with the heavy, dutiful rhythm of survival, but with the quick, uneven tempo of someone who had just discovered that he was still capable of feeling this, that the part of him he thought had gone dark after Claire was not dark at all, just waiting. Waiting for someone to turn the light back on. Lily's voice from the hallway. "I heard that." Nathan opened his eyes. His daughter was standing in her pajamas with her arms crossed and an expression of supreme 12-year-old satisfaction on her face. "Heard what?" "The kiss. These walls are thin, Dad." Also the snort laugh. She snorted again. "Go to bed." Are you guys, like, together now? Lily, because it's about time. I've been waiting for this for literally weeks. Morgan and I had a bet. She owes me $5. You bet on my love life. Someone had to take an interest in it. She turned to go, then looked back over her shoulder. She's good, Dad. Don't mess it up. Then she padded back to her room and closed the door, and Nathan stood alone in the entryway with the lingering scent of Isabella's perfume and the radiator's steady whine, and the strange, terrifying, wonderful sensation of realizing that his daughter was right. About all of it. He walked to the window and looked out at the street below. The city was dark and cold and exactly the same as it had been every night for the past 3 years. But Nathan Cole was not the same. Something had shifted. Something had cracked open. And for the first time since Claire, for the first time since the loss and the grief and the careful, deliberate numbness he had wrapped around himself like insulation, he felt something he had almost forgotten was possible. He felt like the future might actually hold something worth walking toward. Spring arrived in Chicago the way it always did, grudgingly, in fits and starts, with false promises and sudden reversals that kept everyone in a state of perpetual wardrobe uncertainty. One day it was 50 degrees and almost pleasant. The next day it was 30 and sleeting sideways. Nathan had lived through enough Chicago springs to know that you didn't trust them. You kept your winter coat accessible and your expectations low, and eventually, somewhere around mid-April, the city relented and allowed the sun to do its job. This year, though, Nathan barely noticed the weather. He was too busy being happy, which was a full-time occupation he hadn't signed up for, and wasn't entirely sure how to manage. Happiness, it turned out, was disorienting when you'd spent 3 years operating without it. It was like suddenly having a limb restored that you'd trained yourself to live without. Awkward, unfamiliar, occasionally overwhelming, and yet so obviously necessary that you couldn't believe you'd functioned without it. Isabella came to dinner on Fridays and Saturdays, and increasingly on Tuesdays, which started because she had a late meeting downtown one Tuesday, and Nathan said she should come by afterward instead of driving all the way back to her penthouse. And then the next Tuesday, she came again without a meeting as an excuse, and by the third Tuesday it was just what Tuesdays were. They did not move quickly. They couldn't. There was too much behind them, too much scar tissue, too many years of building separate lives to simply merge overnight. Nathan still had mornings where he woke up, and the first person he thought of was Claire. And the guilt of that, the guilt of his dead wife sharing space in his head with the woman he was falling in love with, sometimes sat on his chest like a physical weight. Isabella still had days where the CEO armor snapped back into place without warning, where she became the boardroom version of herself mid-sentence, and Nathan could see the exact moment when she realized it and the visible effort it took to stand down. They were not smooth. They were not elegant. They were two people stumbling toward each other through a landscape of damage, tripping over their own defenses, sometimes retreating into old patterns out of sheer muscle memory. But they kept showing up. That was the thing. They kept showing up. The Scholarship Foundation took shape through March and April. Isabella handled the legal architecture with the precision of someone who had built a billion-dollar company from a corner office. Articles of incorporation, tax-exempt status, board governance structures, endowment management protocols. She worked on it the way she worked on everything, thoroughly, relentlessly, with an attention to detail that Nathan found both impressive and slightly exhausting. Nathan handled the mission. He drove around the city talking to people, teachers, community center directors, parents, coaches, anyone who worked with kids from the kind of neighborhoods where potential was abundant and opportunity was not. He sat in school cafeterias and church basements and community college classrooms and listened to people describe the barriers that stood between talented young people and the lives they deserved. Money, obviously, but also mentorship, guidance, the simple knowledge that someone believed in them. He took notes in a spiral-bound notebook that he carried in his truck, the same kind of notebook he used to track work orders and parts inventories, and at the end of each week he sat at his kitchen table and organized the notes into something coherent. One evening in April, Isabella was sitting across from him at that table, reading through his notes while Lily did homework on the couch. "This is good," Isabella said. "This is really good." "It's just notes." "No, it isn't. It's... Nathan, this is a philosophy. You've written an entire philosophy of what this foundation should be." She held up a page. "This part, about mentorship. about how the scholarship isn't just money, it's connection. It's pairing each student with someone who's been where they've been. That's not in any of the templates my lawyers gave me. That's yours. It just seemed obvious. It's not obvious. Trust me. I've sat on the boards of 6 foundations, and not one of them thought about it this way. They wrote checks. You're building relationships. He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Nathan had never been good at receiving compliments. He tended to deflect them the way he deflected questions about his feelings, with humor or silence or a redirect toward something practical. But Isabella was looking at him with an expression that wasn't admiration exactly. It was recognition. She was seeing him, really seeing him, the way she had seen him when they were kids and he was just a factory worker's son who happened to be funny and kind and completely unaware that those qualities had any value. "We should name it," she said. "The foundation? Yeah, it needs a name." "The Vaughn Foundation? Absolutely not." "I was kidding." "Were you?" "Half kidding. It's his money, his estate. It stopped being his the moment we decided what to do with it. The name should mean something, something about what it actually does, not where it came from." Nathan thought about this. He thought about the kids he'd talked to, the teachers, the parents. He thought about his own father, who had worked in a factory for 31 years and died of a heart attack at 54, and never once complained about the hand he'd been dealt, because complaining required a kind of energy he couldn't spare. He thought about Claire, who had become a nurse because she wanted to help people, and who had helped people every single day of her working life until her body refused to cooperate anymore. "Second chance," he said. Isabella looked at him. "The Second Chance Foundation," he said. "Because that's what it is. A second chance. For kids who got dealt the same hand I got dealt and your father decided was disqualifying." Isabella set the notes down on the table. She was quiet for a moment, and Nathan could see her processing the name, turning it over the way she turned over business proposals and market analyses, testing it for weakness, looking for flaws. "It's perfect," she said. "It's not perfect. Nothing is perfect. It's just right." She smiled. The private one. "Yeah, it's right." From the couch, Lily's voice. "Can I be on the board?" "You're 12, Nathan said. "So I have opinions." "You can be a junior advisor," Isabella said. "What does that mean?" "It means we'll ask your opinion and you'll give it whether we ask or not." "That's basically what I already do." "Then you're overqualified." The foundation paperwork was filed in late April. The Second Chance Foundation, established under the legal framework of Vaughn Industries' philanthropic arm, but operationally independent, governed by a board that included Nathan, Isabella, 2 teachers from Chicago public schools, a community organizer from the South Side named Marcus Williams, who had spent 20 years running youth programs on a shoestring budget, and, at Lily's insistence, the mother of her friend Morgan, who worked as a guidance counselor and had more practical knowledge about helping struggling students than anyone Isabella had ever met. The estate itself was being transformed. Architects and contractors descended on the North Shore property in waves, guided by plans that Isabella had commissioned and Nathan had amended with handwritten notes in the margins. The main house would become the foundation's headquarters, offices, meeting rooms, a library. The guest house would be converted into a residential program for scholarship recipients who needed housing. The grounds, which Richard Vaughn had maintained with the meticulous attention of a man who believed that landscaping was a reflection of character, would be open to the public for the first time. Nathan drove out to the estate one Saturday in May to check on the progress. The gates were open, actually open, not the controlled permission-based opening of the old regime, but propped open with construction barriers while trucks came and went. Workers were everywhere. The sound of power tools and voices carried across the grounds. He walked through the main house and barely recognized it. The heavy curtains were gone, replaced by light. The dark wood paneling in the study, the room where Richard Vaughn had once confessed everything to his daughter, was being stripped and replaced. The hospital bed was gone. The room where Nathan had sat across from a dying man and listened to him explain why 2 children's lives had been acceptable collateral damage was now just a room. 4 walls and a window and the smell of fresh paint. Isabella found him standing in that room, looking out the window at the grounds below. "Strange, isn't it?" she said from the doorway. "Which part?" "All of it. Being here, changing it, turning his monument to control into something he would have hated. Would he have hated it? She considered this. The old version of him, the one who separated us. Absolutely. But the version at the end, the one who changed his will and told the truth and asked you to take care of me. She paused. I think that version might have understood. You're being generous. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of being angry at a dead man. It's exhausting, Nathan. Carrying around rage for someone who can't hear it anymore. It's like screaming into a room with no walls. The sound just goes out in every direction and dissipates and nothing changes. So what do you do instead? I build something. I take what he gave me, the money, the estate, the name, and I make it mean something he never intended. That's not forgiveness. I want to be clear about that. I'm never going to forgive him. But it's something. It's the only power I have over what he did, and I'm going to use it. Nathan looked at her. Standing in the doorway of her dead father's study in jeans and work boots she'd bought specifically for site visits, with sawdust in her hair and a smudge of something on her cheek and her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. You've got something on your face, he said. Where? Right cheek. She rubbed the wrong cheek. Other cheek. She rubbed it and made it worse. He stepped forward and wiped it off with his thumb. And the gesture was so small and so domestic and so utterly unremarkable that it made something ache in his chest, not with pain, but with the quiet, devastating realization that this was his life now. That he was the kind of man who wiped smudges off a woman's face in a construction zone, and that the woman was Isabella Vaughn, and that 20 years ago a man in this very house had decided this could never happen, and it was happening anyway. Thank you, she said. For wiping your face? For everything, for all of it. For answering the door in January. For coming to see my father. For staying the night he died. For the spaghetti and the grilled cheese and the terrible apartment with the broken radiator. For not giving up on me when I showed up out of nowhere and dropped a bomb on your life. You didn't drop a bomb, you knocked on a door. Same thing, sometimes. He kissed her forehead. She closed her eyes. They stood in Richard Vaughn's former study while the construction noise echoed around them and the spring light came through the bare windows, and the future they were building rose up around them like something you could almost touch. The weeks that followed were good, not perfect. Nathan had stopped believing in perfect years ago. Around the same time he stopped believing in luck and started believing in effort. But good. Solidly, reliably, imperfectly good. Isabella officially moved some of her work to Chicago. She kept the New York office. She had to. The company's headquarters was there, and she was still the CEO. But she restructured her schedule so that she was in Chicago more weeks than not. She rented an apartment downtown, a place that was nicer than Nathan's by roughly the same margin that the North Shore estate was nicer than her downtown apartment, which was to say, considerably. But she spent more nights at Nathan's place than at her own, sleeping on the couch or increasingly not on the couch. Lily adapted to the new configuration with the pragmatic flexibility of a child who had already survived the worst thing a child can survive and had come out the other side with her capacity for love intact. She did not call Isabella Mom. Nathan never asked her to. Isabella never expected her to. What Lily called her was Isabella, and sometimes is, and once, memorably, the lady who snorts, which had stuck as an inside joke that all three of them understood and none of them explained to outsiders. But one evening in late May, Nathan overheard a conversation that undid him. He was in the kitchen making dinner, spaghetti again, the default, the go-to, the dish that had somehow become the foundation of this strange new family. And Lily was in the living room with Isabella working on a school project about family trees. Nathan could hear them talking through the open doorway. So I put Mom here, Lily was saying, and Dad here, and Grandma and Grandpa Cole here, and Grandma and Grandpa Sullivan here. That's Mom's parents. And then I have all these branches going back. That's great, Isabella said. You've done a lot of research. But I have a question. Okay. Where do I put you? Silence. Nathan stopped stirring. You don't have to put me anywhere, Isabella said carefully. This is your family tree. You're at our house like every day. You know where the plates go. You help me with my homework. Dad makes that dumb face when he looks at you. You're part of this. Lily, Mrs. Henderson says family isn't just blood. She says family is the people who show up, and you show up. Every time, you always show up. More silence. Nathan stood in the kitchen with a wooden spoon in his hand and sauce bubbling on the stove and his eyes burning. "Put me wherever feels right to you," Isabella said. Her voice was thick, barely controlled. "It's your tree. I'm going to put you on a branch next to Dad, like a new branch, because that's what you are. You're not replacing Mom. Mom's branch is here. You're a new one." Nathan set down the spoon. He braced both hands on the counter and breathed and let the tears come. Just for a moment. Just long enough to acknowledge that his 12-year-old daughter had just articulated something that he had been struggling to put into words for months. That loving Isabella was not a betrayal of Claire. That the heart was not a zero-sum territory. That new love did not erase old love, but grew alongside it, a separate branch on the same tree. He wiped his eyes, picked up the spoon, kept stirring. At dinner that night, Lily showed them the family tree. Isabella's name was written in blue marker on a branch extending from Nathan's side, slightly below and to the right, with a small heart drawn next to it that Lily insisted was just decorative and absolutely not sentimental. "It's beautiful," Isabella said. "It's a school project," Lily said. "Don't make it weird." "Too late," Nathan said. "It's already weird. This entire situation is weird." "Agreed," Lily said. "But it's our weird." June came. The construction on the estate progressed. The foundation's first round of scholarship applications opened, and within 2 weeks they had received over 300 applications from students across the state. Nathan read every single one. He sat at his kitchen table at night after Lily was asleep and read the stories of 17-year-olds who worked 2 jobs and maintained a 3.8 GPA, of first-generation college students whose parents had never finished high school, of kids from neighborhoods where the statistical likelihood of success was so low that succeeding was practically an act of defiance. Each application reminded him of himself, of who he had been at 17, working weekends at a hardware store, helping his mother with groceries, lying on the grass in a park with a girl who believed in him more than he believed in himself. He had not gone to college. He had not needed to. He had found his path through work, through the practical intelligence of his hands and his instincts. But he knew, with a certainty that lived in his bones, that the lack of opportunity was not the same thing as the lack of ability, and that every kid in that pile of applications deserved the chance to find out what they were capable of. He talked to Isabella about it one night, sitting on the couch after dinner with the TV on mute and the city sounds filtering through the windows. "I read an application today," he said. "A girl from Englewood, 17. Her mother works nights at a hospital. Not a nurse, a janitor. Her father left when she was 6. She has a 3.9 GPA, and she wants to study engineering. She wrote in her essay that she's never met an engineer in her life. She doesn't know a single person who does the thing she wants to do. She just knows she wants to do it." "What's her name?" "Daniela. Daniela Reyes." "She's in?" "She's the first one in." Isabella leaned against him. He put his arm around her, a gesture that had been awkward at first and was now as natural as breathing. She fit against him in a way that was not cinematic, not the perfect puzzle piece alignment of movie couples. His arm was slightly too low, her shoulder dug into his rib. It was comfortable the way comfortable actually worked. Not ideal, just familiar, just theirs. "Nathan." "Yeah. I want to ask you something." "Okay." "Not right now, soon, but I want you to know it's coming." He looked down at her. "That's not ominous at all." "I'm serious. You're always serious. That's one of your 3 settings: serious, laughing, and asleep." "I have more than 3 settings." "Name a 4th. She thought about it. "Hungry." "Hungry isn't a setting. Hungry is a permanent condition." She elbowed him. He laughed. She laughed. The radiator clunked. The super had finally come to look at it in March and had declared it working as intended, which Nathan interpreted as, "I have no idea what's wrong with it, and I'm choosing to redefine the problem as a feature." The something that Isabella wanted to ask came on a Saturday evening in mid-June. They were at the estate. Not for construction. The main building was nearly finished, fresh paint drying on the walls, new furniture being delivered, The study transformed into a bright, open conference room with windows that looked out over the grounds. They were there because Isabella had wanted to see it in the evening light, to stand in the space and feel what it had become. They walked through the rooms together. Nathan pointed out things the contractors had done well, and things they had done less well because that was his nature, to see the flaws, to understand the mechanics, to know where the seams were. Isabella pointed out things that needed adjusting, modifications to the original plan, small changes that would make the space work better for the students who would eventually fill it. They ended up on the back patio, the same stone patio where they had stood on the day of Nathan's second visit, when Isabella had told him she didn't know what she was doing, and he had said that was weirdly comforting. The patio looked different now. The bare winter trees had leafed out, green and full, and the grounds below were being landscaped into something more open, more inviting, less like the private estate of a controlling billionaire, and more like a place where young people might actually want to spend time. The sun was setting, not dramatically. Chicago sunsets were usually more practical than beautiful, the sun going down the way a factory worker clocked out, efficiently and without fanfare. But tonight there was color. Orange and pink layered over the lake in the distance, the kind of sky that made you stop and look even if you weren't the kind of person who stopped and looked. "Nathan," Isabella said. "Yeah. The thing I wanted to ask you. The ominous thing. It's not ominous. You literally said, 'I want you to know it's coming.' That's the textbook definition of ominous." She turned to face him. She was holding something in her hand, a small box, dark velvet, the kind of box that only held one type of thing. Nathan's breath stopped. "I know this is supposed to go the other way," she said. "I know there's a convention. The man asks. The man gets down on one knee. The man has a speech prepared. I know all of that. I also know that I am a 30-year-old woman who runs a Fortune 500 company and has spent her entire adult life waiting for other people to make the first move because she was too afraid of rejection to do it herself. And I am done waiting." Isabella said, "Let me finish. I rehearsed this." "Of course you did." "Nathan Cole, you are the first person I ever loved. You are the only person whose absence changed the shape of my entire life. For 20 years, I believed I had lost you. And for 20 years, I built walls around the place where you used to be. And then you opened your door in your socks and your Fun Run t-shirt, and the walls started coming down. I didn't plan this. I didn't forecast it. It's not on any spreadsheet. But I love you. I love Lily. I love the stupid radiator and the spaghetti and the apartment that's too small and Dolores at Marlowe's and the way you burn the garlic every single time because you can't stop talking long enough to stir. I can stir and talk at the same, marry me." The words landed in the evening air, solid and certain, without flourish or qualification. 2 words. The simplest, most terrifying 2 words in the language. Nathan looked at the box in her hand. Then he looked at her face. This face he had known since he was 12. This face that had been absent for 20 years and present for 4 months, and was now, somehow, the face he couldn't imagine his life without. "Yes," he said. "Really? Did you expect me to say no? I prepared a rebuttal in case you said no." "Of course you did. It was very persuasive." "I'm sure it was. The answer is yes." She opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, understated, a thin gold band with a single stone. Nothing like the massive, expensive pieces that probably filled the jewelry boxes of people in her world. This was chosen for him, for who he actually was. "I picked it because it's not flashy," she said. "Because you're not flashy. Because you're the most substantial person I've ever known, and you've never once needed anyone to notice." He took the ring, put it on. It fit. Not perfectly. Slightly snug on the left hand, which meant he'd been clenching his fists more than he realized, but it fit. "We should tell Lily," he said. "I already told Lily." "What?" "I asked her permission 2 weeks ago. I drove to Morgan's house while you were at work, and I sat in their kitchen, and I told Lily that I wanted to marry her father, and I asked her if that was okay." "What did she say?" "She said finally, and then she asked if this meant she could have a dog." Nathan laughed. A real laugh, full and unguarded, the kind that came from the very center of him. He laughed until his eyes watered, standing on the patio of a house that was being reborn, wearing a ring given to him by a woman who had once been taken from him and who had come back and who was standing in front of him with sawdust still in her hair from the construction site, and tears on her cheeks, and the kind of smile that rearranged the entire world around it. He pulled her close. She pressed her face into his shoulder. They stood on the patio as the sun went down over the lake, and the construction site settled into silence, and the evening settled over the estate that was no longer an estate, but a beginning. "Can she have a dog?" Isabella asked, her voice muffled against his shirt. "We'll talk about it." "That means yes." "It means we'll talk about it." "Nathan, she's getting a dog." They told Lily the next morning at the kitchen table. Nathan made pancakes, not as good as Gio's, never as good as Gio's, but serviceable. And Isabella sat across from Lily and showed her the ring on Nathan's hand, and Lily reacted with the specific brand of satisfaction that only a 12-year-old who has been right about something could muster. "I knew it," she said. "I called it weeks ago. Morgan owes me another $5. "You're running a gambling operation based on my personal life," Nathan said. "It's not gambling if you know the outcome. It's investing." Isabella laughed. The snort. "So when's the wedding?" Lily asked. "We haven't talked about that yet," Nathan said. "Can I be in it?" "Obviously." "Can I pick my own dress?" "Within reason." "Can we get a dog before the wedding?" "We're not getting a—" Nathan stopped, looked at Isabella. Isabella was looking at Lily. Lily was looking at both of them with an expression of serene, tactical confidence. "We'll talk about it," Nathan said. "That means yes," Lily and Isabella said simultaneously, and then looked at each other and laughed. And Nathan sat at his small kitchen table in his small apartment with his imperfect pancakes and his clunking radiator and these two people who had somehow become the center of his entire world, and he thought, this is it. This is the thing. Not the ring, not the proposal, not the foundation, or the estate, or the money, or any of the external architecture. This table, this laughter, this moment of three people who chose each other, this is the thing that matters. The foundation opened officially in August. They held the ceremony on the grounds of the former Vaughn estate on a Saturday afternoon that was warm and bright and completely wrong for the occasion. Too beautiful, too cheerful, the kind of day that felt almost mocking given the weight of what the place represented. But Nathan had learned long ago that life didn't bother coordinating its weather with its meaning, and that happy things and sad things happened under the same sky, and that the sky didn't care about either one. 50 people attended, not 300, like the funeral. 50. The board members. The first class of scholarship recipients, 12 students, including Daniela Reyes, who had arrived that morning from Englewood in a car driven by her mother, the hospital janitor, who had taken the night off work for the first time in a year. Teachers. Community leaders. Marcus Williams, who gave a speech about second chances that was short and specific and made 4 people cry. Morgan's mother, who had brought a casserole because she was the kind of person who brought casseroles, and the world was better for it. Lily was there, obviously. She wore a blue dress she had picked out herself, and she moved through the crowd with the easy confidence of someone who had been involved in this project from the beginning and considered herself personally responsible for its success. She introduced herself to each scholarship recipient individually, shaking their hands and asking them what they planned to study, and Nathan watched from across the lawn and felt his chest expand with a pride so fierce it bordered on painful. Isabella gave a speech. Not the boardroom version of herself, not the controlled, rehearsed public persona who had delivered her father's eulogy without saying a single true thing. This was the other version, the real one. She stood at a podium on the lawn of the house where she had grown up, and she told the truth. She told them about her father, about what he had done. Not the specifics, not the intercepted letters, not the fabricated messages, not the systematic destruction of 2 teenagers' love, but the principle of it. She told them that this house had been built by a man who believed that money and power gave him the right to decide other people's futures, that he had used his wealth to control the people around him, including his own daughter, that he had spent his life believing that the value of a human being could be measured by their bank account and their zip code and their family name. And then she told them that the foundation existed to prove him wrong. Every one of you is here because someone, somewhere, decided you weren't enough, she said, looking out at the 12 students sitting in the front row. Not smart enough, not connected enough, not wealthy enough. Someone looked at your circumstances and made a judgment about your potential. This foundation exists because that judgment was wrong. It was wrong about you. It was wrong about the man standing over there in the bad tie. She pointed at Nathan, who looked down at his tie and then back up. And it was wrong about every person in this country who has ever been told that where they come from determines where they're going. She paused. The crowd was quiet. A bird called from one of the trees at the edge of the grounds. A persistent, repetitive call that sounded almost like commentary. This house used to be a monument to control, Isabella continued. Today it becomes something else. It becomes yours. Use it, study in it, argue in it, make mistakes in it, build lives that would have made its original owner uncomfortable. That's not just permission. That's the whole point. She stepped away from the podium. The applause was not polished or coordinated. It was messy, enthusiastic, the kind of clapping that happened when people genuinely meant it. Daniela Reyes was crying. Her mother was crying harder. Marcus Williams was nodding with the slow, satisfied nod of a man who had waited 20 years for something like this to exist and was not going to waste the moment being restrained about it. Nathan found Isabella in the crowd afterward. She was standing near the edge of the lawn, slightly apart from the group, watching the scholarship students explore the grounds with the dazed fascination of young people who had just been given something they hadn't dared to expect. "Good speech," he said. "I went off script." "I know. That's why it was good." She leaned into him. He put his arm around her. They stood at the edge of the lawn and watched the future they had built fill up with the people it was built for. "Nathan." "Yeah. Are we okay?" He thought about the question. Really thought about it. Not the reflexive "fine" that he had been giving people for years. Not the automatic reassurance. The real answer. "We're not okay," he said. "We're better than okay. We're a mess. A functional, imperfect, complicated mess. We've got 20 years of damage, and a dead wife, and a dead father, and a 12-year-old who's running a gambling ring based on our relationship. We've got a foundation we don't entirely know how to run, and an apartment with a broken radiator and a truck that makes a sound I keep meaning to investigate. None of it is okay. None of it is settled. None of it is finished." He paused. "But all of it is ours, and I wouldn't trade it for anything." She didn't respond with words. She just stood there, leaning against him, watching the students on the lawn, letting the moment be what it was without trying to improve it or manage it or forecast its implications. And that, Nathan thought, was the whole lesson. Not the dramatic version, not the version that sounded good in a speech or looked good on a movie screen. The real, unglamorous, uncinematic lesson that their story had been trying to teach them all along. You can't control the people you love. You can try. With money, with power, with manipulation, with the desperate conviction that you know better than they do what they need. And maybe, for a while, it works. Maybe the letters get intercepted and the lies get believed and the people you're controlling go on to build the lives you designed for them. But the cost is everything that actually matters. The cost is 20 years of loneliness. The cost is a daughter who can run a company but can't let anyone close enough to touch her. The cost is a man who grows up believing he wasn't enough and spends his whole adult life trying to outrun that belief. The only thing you can do, the only thing that works, the only thing that's ever worked, is show up. Keep showing up. Through the mess and the fear and the broken radiators and the burnt garlic and the conversations that don't have clean endings. You show up and you stay, and you let the people you love be imperfect, and you let yourself be imperfect, and you build something that isn't beautiful or efficient or optimized but is real, is yours, is enough. Nathan Cole had spent his whole life fixing broken things. He had built a career out of it, looking at what was damaged, understanding why, and making it work again. Not making it perfect, making it work. There was a difference, and it was the most important difference in the world. And now, standing on the lawn of a house that had been built on control and rebuilt on hope, with his arm around a woman who had come back to him after 20 years and a daughter who was somewhere in the crowd negotiating the terms of a future dog, he understood that the same principle applied to people. You didn't fix them. You didn't complete them. You didn't fill the gaps in their lives with your presence and call it done. You just stood next to them and worked on the broken parts together, one day at a time, knowing that the work would never be finished and that the never being finished was exactly the point. Lily appeared at his side, slightly out of breath, with grass stains on her blue dress and a look of barely contained excitement. "Daniela is amazing," she said. "She's going to study engineering. She wants to design bridges. Did you know she's never been on a plane? We should fix that." "We should fix that," Nathan agreed. "Also, I talked to 3 other students, and they're all incredible, and I think we need more scholarships." "We've been open for 45 minutes, Lily." "So, start planning." Isabella laughed. Nathan laughed. Lily stood between them with her grass-stained dress and her mother's eyes, and her complete, unshakable belief that the world could be made better if you just kept pushing, and the 3 of them stood on the lawn together in the late afternoon sun and let the moment be what it was. Not a happy ending. Not really. Because it wasn't an ending. It was a Tuesday in August, warm and ordinary, the beginning of something that would take the rest of their lives to build. There would be hard days, days when the money was tight and the foundation hit bureaucratic walls, and Nathan and Isabella had the kind of fight where you say things you don't mean and spend 2 days not talking and then make up over terrible coffee at Marlowe's, while Dolores ignored them with professional indifference. There would be mornings when Nathan woke up thinking about Claire and felt the old grief settle over him like weather, and evenings when Isabella's boardroom armor snapped back on, and Lily had to be the one to gently tell her that she was being the CEO again, and could she please stop? It would be imperfect, all of it, every single day. But they would show up. They would keep showing up. The single father and the billionaire and the 12-year-old who understood more about love than either of them. They would keep showing up, keep building, keep stumbling towards something that didn't have a name but felt like home. And the radiator would keep clunking. Because some things never get fixed, and that's okay too.